Chapter 1670. At the same time, the hood on his head was finally torn apart completely, revealing his true appearance. When he fell to the ground, his first reaction was to cover his face with his sleeves. However, everyone present had excellent eyesight. It was obvious that it was useless for him to cover up now. Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes. It was the face of a man who looked to be in his 30s. His appearance was ordinary, and his facial features were ordinary. He was unremarkable in the crowd. However, his eyes, were pure black. At a glance, it was empty and dark. It was indeed strange. Perhaps because he had suffered a series of huge blows, his body had become much more illusory, and his aura was weak. The brilliant sky staff had been broken into two. Half of it fell to the ground while the other half was still tightly held in his palm. The cut was smooth and neat. It was obvious how powerful the sword just now was. Of course, that did not mean that Chu Luiyue was stronger than the other party. It could only be said that the battle intent in those stones was too strong. It was so strong that the sword cut him. Chu Luiyue walked forward. The black-robed man trembled instinctively and wanted to retreat. However, he realized that his body seemed to be nailed to the ground and could not move. He was shocked and looked around in panic again. The vast and boundless wilderness was empty, silent, and cold. There were only pieces of broken tombstones that stood in a mess and did not move. There was no response. Just like the previous situation, the tombs had actually severed the connection between him and the tombs, and he had been completely abandoned. How could this be? How could this be? He could not figure it out. It had been fine for the past few years. He could borrow the power here and use it for himself. That was why he dared to say that this was his territory. But now, everything had become a lie. A pair of boots appeared in the corner of his eyes. His body froze, and he suddenly stopped all his movements. The air seemed to have frozen. A dazzling sword light cut through the void and stabbed straight at him. Swoosh! The tip of the sword was pointed at his glabella. It was just an inch away. As long as Chu Luiyue wanted to, she could take his life directly. However, she did not make a move immediately. There were too many secrets hidden in this man. It would be a pity if she killed him just like that. What are you looking for? Chu Luiyue tilted his head and asked indifferently. She could clearly see that the man had been looking left and right since just now, as if he was looking for something or waiting for something. The black-robed man glanced at the broken brilliant heaven rod in his hand and suddenly sneered. Then, he casually threw away the remaining half. Don't you know what I'm looking for? His words were filled with mockery. Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes slightly. Before she could say anything, the man had already closed his eyes. If you agree to a bet, you must accept your loss. Since I've lost you today, then you can kill me or torture me as you wish. He never thought of begging for mercy, because he knew better than anyone that at this time, living was more painful than dying. It could only be said that there was a careless mistake. He had underestimated Shang Guanyu. Chu Luiyue found it even more interesting to see him begging for death. His pale lips curled into a cold smile. All these years, you've attacked me many times. Now, you want to die? How can there be such a good thing? The black-robed man's heart sank, and he suddenly opened his eyes. What do you want? He knew her quite well. This woman was not easy to deal with. If he really fell into her hands, she would definitely have the means to make him suffer a fate worse than death. Chu Luiyue raised her chin. I don't want anything. I've always been a person who believes in reciprocity. You must have put in a lot of effort to give me those gifts before, so of course I have to return the favor. Let me ask you a few questions. If I'm satisfied with your answers, I'll give you a quick end. How about that? The black-robed man took a deep breath, but his heart was still burning. He sneered. What if you're still not satisfied with my answers? Chu Luiyue shrugged. Then you can only blame yourself for being unlucky. Shameless. The black-robed man had already expected her to do this, so he did not intend to agree to her request from the beginning. He closed his eyes again, as if he had already made up his mind not to give her any answer. Chu Luiyue did not mind. She put down the black shield and took out the black wooden tablet. She weighed it in her hand and asked with interest, "This thing is very important to the people of the Black Demon Cave, but since you've already betrayed us, I presume this thing is of no use to you?" The black-robed man refused to answer, his attitude firm. Chu Luiyue glanced at him, then handed the black wooden tablet to Dumpling. "Dumpling, get rid of this eyesore." "Okay." Dumpling agreed crisply and took the wooden tablet. Her other hand was not injured, so she exerted force and the wooden tablet was reduced to dust. The black-robed man did not even bat an eyelid. Chu Luiyue nodded in understanding. "It seems that you really have no connection with the Black Demon Cave, and you've found another way to store this soul. If I'm not wrong, it should be this black robe?" Hearing this, the man suddenly opened his eyes. When he saw that Chu Luiyue seemed to have confirmed something, he came back to his senses and gritted his teeth. "You tricked me?" Chu Luiyue smiled. "I was just guessing. Who knew that you would admit it so quickly?" Without a physical body, the soul had to find something to store in order to successfully survive for a long time. Just like Taizu back then, several souls were separated and stored in the Dragon Abyss sword and the Jade Pendant. And this man dared to use this black wooden tablet as bait and put it in her hands, which meant that he did not care about it. The higher the level of a person from the Black Demon Cave, the closer the connection with this wooden tablet. Based on this man's strength, he could not have easily broken free from this layer of restraint. He must have used some method to forcibly break free, otherwise, he wouldn't have had such confidence. Chu Luiyue sized him up for a while. The black-robed man turned his gaze away. After that, no matter what Chu Luiyue said, he refused to speak. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. At this moment, Rongxiu suddenly said, "Mo Shiqian still doesn't know that you're hiding here, right? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 1671. These words finally caused the man to react. He suddenly looked at Rongxiu, his eyes filled with bewilderment. "What do you know?" There was a hint of panic and fear in his words. Obviously, he was fearful and in awe of the Mo Shiqian that Rongxiu mentioned. Seeing his reaction, Chu Luiyue asked curiously, "Why are you still here?" Mo Shiqian, why does this name sound so familiar? Rongxiu raised his eyebrows. The leader of the Black Demon Cave. At the same time, he was also his former master. Chu Luiyue suddenly understood. No wonder. She had indeed heard of this name before. It was just that a few years had passed and she had lost a lot of memories in the middle, so she did not immediately recall it. Only when Rongxiu said this did she recall. The black-robed man's expression turned even uglier. He stared at Rongxiu with a deadly gaze, afraid that the latter would say something shocking. However, Rongxiu did not continue to pay attention to him after asking this question. Instead, he walked in front of Chu Luiyue and held her hand. A gentle force quickly entered her body, tidying up the wild force around her bit by bit, and at the same time healing her injuries. "I'm here. Don't force yourself." Rongxiu's voice was low and gentle. Chu Luiyue immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Previously, she had indeed been barely holding on. After going through such a fierce battle, her strength had been completely exhausted. Even with the help of external forces, her body was still suffering from considerable pain and torment. It was just that she had been tense and did not dare to reveal anything. It was only now that she heard Rongxiu's whisper and felt the endless power and heat in his palm that she finally relaxed a little. "Did you have a good fight?" Rongxiu looked down at her and asked. Chu Luiyue raised her head slightly and met his eyes. There were many things that did not need to be said. A look was enough. The corners of her mouth slowly raised into a smile, and she nodded with curved eyes. Yes. Everything that he had suffered before was finally paid back. She had been holding it in for several years, and now she was finally able to release it. Awesome. Seeing her happy, Rongxiu's thin lips also slightly raised a curve. That's good. You can leave the rest to me, right? Chu Luiyue blushed slightly, but a warm current gushed out from the bottom of her heart. Even her limbs and bones warmed up. Others might find it strange that Rongxiu did not make a move from the beginning to the end. Only she knew that Rong Xiao had done this on purpose. She had been pestered by this man for many years, and now she could finally settle all their grudges. In the end, it was best for him to take revenge with his own hands. Rong Xiao had been watching everything from the side. He must have been having a hard time waiting, right? Chu Luyue gently nodded, then couldn't help but ask, "That's right. Leave his life to me." Rong Xiao held his forehead helplessly, and the smile on his lips deepened. "I know." Other than when the two of them first met, when he helped her kill someone and made her unhappy, he had never made the same mistake again. This was also the reason why he didn't do it even though he had several opportunities to kill people. Chu Ning also came over at this time. Are you alright? Even though the outcome was already decided, he still felt a lingering fear when he thought of what happened just now. At this moment, seeing her pale face, his heart was still throbbing with pain. Rong Xiao let go of Chu Liyue's hand. "You go accompany Lord Chu Ning. I'll interrogate him." It wasn't easy for father and daughter to reunite, so they needed more time to spend together. Chu Liyue glanced at Rong Xiao. This man could always guess what she was thinking and could always take care of all her feelings. She nodded and turned to look at Chu Ning. "Father." This call made Chu Ning's nose ache. He looked at Chu Liyue carefully. She was right in front of him. He clearly had a lot to say, but after seeing the face that he had been thinking about day and night, he suddenly couldn't say those words. After a while, Chu Ning said, Good. You has grown up." This face was still the familiar face in his memory, but it had changed a lot. The youthful aura between her eyebrows had quietly dissipated. It was replaced by a subduing, heroic spirit. Furthermore, there was an indescribable aura of nobility around her. That was a temperament that came from her bones. Just by standing there, she made people unconsciously submit to her. Chu Ning looked at her without blinking. She was obviously very familiar, but she was obviously different from the person in his memory. Looking at him emotional but not daring to step forward, Chu Liyue's eyes suddenly turned red. "Father, has made you suffer." Looking at the dense tears in her eyes, all the messy thoughts in Chu Ning's heart flew away in an instant, leaving only heartache. He hurriedly reached out to wipe her tears. No, is the best. Don't cry, don't cry. Father's heart aches." Chu Liyue rarely cried. Although her eyes were red, she had been holding it in. But when she heard this, she suddenly couldn't help but cry. But she quickly held back the remaining tears. It was already a blessing in life to be able to see each other again. She couldn't be happier, let alone other things. With this, the final invisible barrier between the father and daughter was shattered. Tuanzi grabbed Chu Liyue's clothes with one hand and looked up at her. Then, it looked at Chu Liyue and Chu Ning before breaking into a smile. On the other side, Rong Xiao stood in front of the black-robed man. The black-robed man became more and more nervous. Rong Xiao raised his sword-like eyebrows slightly and said with a faint smile, "If he knows that you are snatching something from him, guess how he will react? Digression. I really don't have any more." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1672. The black-robed man clenched his fists unconsciously. Even though he had left the Black Demon Cave for several years, every time he heard that person's name, his heart would still tremble. It was still the same today. He opened his mouth, wanting to defend himself, but he didn't know what to say. Rong Xiao's gaze was like a sharp blade, piercing straight into his heart. It was as if all lies were jokes in front of him. How do you know all this? Not many people knew that Immerse was also looking for that water droplet. In fact, in comparison, he was the one who was more high-profile. However, Immerse had always been cautious, especially in the past few years. This time, he deliberately led Shengguanyu here to avoid the eyes of the Black Demon Cave. However, I did not expect Rong Xiao to he already came to find me. How do you think I know? Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly. If not for the fact that he can't leave the Black Demon Cave now, do you think you can live safely until today? The black-robed man gritted his teeth. The silence was almost suffocating. Hearing this, Chu Luiyue blinked in surprise. Emo Shiqian went to look for you? Rong Xiao looked back, a faint smile on his lips. To be precise, you've seen him before. The one who appeared in the northern region of the primordial world was his illusion. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. So that person was Emo Shiqian. She knew that other than the black-robed man, there had always been people who wanted to attack her, but she didn't think of this. Although she had met the other party before, the other party had never shown his true appearance, so she didn't know much about the other party. Unexpectedly, Rong Xiao glanced at the black-robed man and said indifferently, "A few years ago, Emo Shiqian had a capable subordinate, Shan Chen. This person was talented and deeply trusted by Emo Shiqian. In just a few years, he grew from a nobody to Emo Shiqian's right-hand man. Rumor has it that Emo Shiqian once planned to leave the position of the head of the 8 Hall Masters to him. Unfortunately, before the celebration, this person inexplicably disappeared, and there has been no news since then. Furthermore, all information related to this person in the Black Demon Cave was sealed and wiped out overnight. It's as if this person never existed. Many people thought that he was dead. But who would have thought that the once all-powerful figure in the Black Demon Cave was actually hiding in the God-slaying mound for several years?" Rong Xiao spoke slowly, but every word he said was like a steel knife, fiercely scraping the man in the black robe. His expression changed from shock, suspicion, and disbelief to deep despair and fear. Originally, he wanted to deny it, but Rong Xiao had said it so clearly. With just a few words, he had completely exposed him. What else was there to refute? When Chu Luiyue heard this, he also understood something. He looked at the black-robed man and frowned. "You betrayed the Black Demon Cave in order to steal my things?" The black-robed man suddenly sneered. "Don't you already know? Why are you asking me again?" His attitude was arrogant and perverse. Obviously, he did not intend to cooperate. Rong Xiao was not in a hurry. He said calmly, "If you speak properly, I'll give you a quick death. If you continue to be like this, I think Emo Shiqian will be happy to receive this gift." These words finally made the black-robed man waver. He would rather die in the hands of these two people than go back to face Emo Shiqian. What he had done all these years was definitely enough for him to suffer a fate worse than death countless times. After a long silence, he finally gritted his teeth and said, "Do you mean what you say? If I say it and you go back on your word in the end, what will happen?" Rong Xiao chuckled. "Is it your turn to bargain now?" The black-robed man immediately fell silent. No matter what he chose, it was a dead end. The only difference was whether the pain before death was more or less. After a while, he finally said, "I'll say it. Actually, the Black Demon Cave has been searching for that thing since many years ago. A few years ago, by chance, the Lord, Emo Shiqian, received news that that thing might be born, so he personally let a few people to go. I was one of them. At that time, although we knew what he was looking for, we didn't know the details. We only knew that it was very important to him. Later, we finally found traces of that thing. We searched for it for a long time without sleep or rest. We experienced countless difficulties and dangers in the process. In the end, when we finally saw that thing, only he and I were still alive. I thought that things would end once we found it, but it turned out that I was just overthinking." The black-robed man suddenly laughed self-deprecatingly. "That thing has intelligence and refused to give in. It fought with us. It was also because of that battle that my body was damaged and he was seriously injured. As a result, he can't leave the Black Demon Cave until today." Chu Luiyue frowned. She really didn't know about these things. She remembered that when she obtained this water droplet, it was actually an extremely coincidental situation. Moreover, at that time, she didn't even see what it was before it forcefully entered her body. Intelligence. It did have intelligence, but it didn't seem to resist or fight. Why did he say it was so difficult and dangerous? There was a trace of hatred in the black-robed man's voice. At that time, in order to snatch that thing, he wanted to refine my soul and use it as a primer to subdue it. Unfortunately, I noticed it and tried my best to escape. Later, I accidentally broke into the god-slaying tomb and obtained an opportunity here. I stayed here and severed all ties with the Black Demon Cave. So Immerse had once wanted to kill him. No wonder. Your connection with the Black Wooden Token was also cut off at that time, right? Chu Lu asked. The black-robed man closed his eyes. That's right. He wanted to refine my soul, so he removed the restriction, which gave me a chance to escape. Because of this, the people of the Black Demon Cave have never found any trace of me all these years. She didn't know if it was fortunate or unfortunate. From then on, I knew that that thing was the most precious treasure in the world. If I wanted to take revenge, I had to snatch it. Unfortunately, whether it was him or me, we were one step behind you. The black-robed man stared at Chu Luiyue and suddenly sneered. Actually, to be precise, that thing chose you. No matter how hard others tried, it was still useless. He didn't believe it before, but now he had to believe it. They had gone through several life and death situations and still couldn't get what they wanted, but she easily took it. Sometimes, the gap between people was just that big. After knowing that that thing followed you, we all had our eyes on you. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1673. It's just that all these years, I've been acting in secret and never let him find any clues. Unfortunately, he was very cautious in doing this, because he knew too well what kind of methods Immerse would use to deal with him once he knew that he was still alive and wanted to snatch this thing from him. Every time he made a move, he would choose the right time and make all the preparations before taking action. Until this time, when the time was right, he finally used Chu Ning to lure her over. He thought that it was foolproof and was determined to win. Unfortunately, man proposes, God disposes. In the end, he still suffered a crushing defeat. At this point, I've said everything I need to say. As the black-robed man spoke, he closed his eyes as if he could kill or cut him up at will. The surroundings were silent. Only the wind on the wasteland blew past their ears, bringing with it a hint of coldness. Chu Lua stared at him for a while before finally digesting what he had said. After a moment, she took a step forward. The black-robed man thought that she was going to make a move and felt relieved. However, unexpectedly, Chu Lua was not going to kill him. I have 2 more questions. If you answer truthfully, I'll send you on your way personally. The black-robed man opened his eyes and frowned. He had already said everything clearly. What else did she want to ask? However, seeing that Chu Liyue's expression did not seem to be fake, he asked patiently. What? First, back then, when you were determined to take revenge, you decided to compete with him for this thing. That means you know what it is? Second, when you were fighting with me just now, what were you waiting for? Chu Liyue asked these 2 questions calmly. However, the black-robed man's expression changed instantly. He subconsciously looked away and frowned. After a while, he said, If you don't know what it is, how can others know? Besides, just now you were wrong. I wasn't waiting for anything. Chu Liyue smiled. It seems that you want to go back to the Black Demon Cave to take a look. The black-robed man was furious. Unfortunately, he was at the mercy of others. No matter how aggrieved he was, there was nothing he could do. Both sides were in a stalemate. After a long while, he finally opened his mouth with difficulty. That is, whoosh. A ripping sound could be heard. The black robe on his body seemed to have been ruthlessly torn apart by an invisible blade. Rong Xiu's eyes darkened, and he immediately attacked. But it was too late. The black robe shattered at an even faster speed, turning into powder. As for the man's soul, it completely dissipated. In just a few breaths of time, the black-robed man had vanished into thin air. Not a single trace was left behind. Chu Lua frowned. That black robe is the reason why he was able to survive for so long. Perhaps due to some reason, the black robe was destroyed on its own, and he was killed along with it. Rong Xiu's eyes flashed with a fierce look. What a pity. Chu Lua shook his head. Anyway, We've already asked all the questions we need to ask. As for the last two questions, I just want to confirm his attitude. In the end, he was just a puppet. Rong Xiao looked at her. Chu Liyue's lips curved up slightly. She then looked at her surroundings and said meaningfully, "This god-slaying mound, it really hides countless secrets, doesn't it?" At first, she wasn't sure. But the black-robed man's reaction just now confirmed her guess. But after coming here, she didn't feel threatened. Especially after these stones stuck to her, she seemed to feel more at ease walking in the god-slaying mound. Moreover, she had finally solved a problem that had been bothering her for years. This trip was worth it. "Let's go find Taizu first, then we'll leave this place after we meet up," Chu Liyue said. Rong Xiao nodded and was about to speak, but suddenly his expression changed slightly, and he turned his head. Chu Liyue followed his gaze and saw a few familiar figures. Her lips curled slightly, but there was no smile in her eyes. They really are haunting. Almost at the same time when Rong Xiao and Chu Liyue looked over, Elder Wu Peng stopped in his tracks. Behind him, Nan Yuxing and the others also came to a stop. At this point, they could finally see the scene in front of them. But everything in front of them shocked them to the core. How are they still alive? Nan Yuxing was shocked and muttered in disbelief, almost suspecting that he had seen wrongly. He rubbed his eyes and looked carefully, but found that the two people were still in his line of sight. Oh no, it was 4 people. In addition to Rong Xiao and Nan Yuxing, the little girl from before also appeared. Next to her, there was a middle-aged man covered in blood and in a sorry state. From the way they interacted with each other, it seemed that they were very close to them. But in addition to these 4 people, the black-robed man from before was nowhere to be seen. Elder Wu Peng's eyes quickly swept across the scene in front of him, and his heart slowly sank. The ground was a mess, and it was clear that the battle here was intense. But Rong Xiao and the others were still standing here, and the black-robed man was nowhere to be seen. "Looks like the black-robed man lost." Elder Wu Peng lowered his voice. "How is that possible?" Nan Yuxing instinctively retorted. "He's so strong. Even if Rong Xiao and the others worked together, they wouldn't be able to defeat him." That was true. Even Elder Wu Peng himself felt that this conjecture was too absurd. But other than this answer, was there any other explanation? Then, could it be that the black-robed man suddenly showed mercy and let them go? Nan Yuxing choked. The others stopped talking. They had seen the black-robed man's attitude clearly. He would never reconcile with Rong Xiao and the others. But now, I felt that something was wrong just now. Elder Wu Peng clenched his fists. On the way here, they saw from afar that the blood-red color in the sky faded quickly, and the blood-red beam of light fell straight down, causing quite a commotion. At that time, he thought that he was overthinking, but who knew? Elder Bai Tong couldn't help but say, "I think Rong Xiao and the others are a bit strange. Why don't we leave first and then, what a coincidence, we meet again." Before Elder Bai Tong could finish his sentence, Chu Liyue smiled and greeted the few of them. "I remember that you all left before, saying that you were going to look for something, right? Why did you turn back halfway? Could it be that you want to come back and see how the battle is going?" With that, Chu Liyue spread out his hands helplessly. "What a pity. I seem to have disappointed you." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1674. Her words undoubtedly confirmed the guesses of Elder Wu Peng and the others. They looked at each other with sullen expressions. Although they came back for other important matters, they weren't in a good mood when they saw Rong Xiao and the others standing here safe and sound. Apart from shock, they were more puzzled. That black-robed man was a venerable god. Wasn't it a piece of cake to deal with them? What exactly happened in the middle to make the outcome turn out like this? They couldn't figure it out. They really couldn't figure it out. Nan Yi was annoyed at the sight of Chu Liyue, and when she heard this, she was even angrier. However, before he could say anything, he was stopped by Elder Wu Peng. "You've misunderstood. We're not interested in your matters. We came back here because we have something else to deal with." Chu Liyue blinked and looked around. Oh, could it be that the thing you're looking for is here? As soon as she finished speaking, the expressions of the people opposite her changed again. This surprised Chu Luiyue. She was just teasing and said it casually. Who knew that it seemed to be true? This time, she really couldn't help but laugh. It seems that I was right. Our matters have nothing to do with you. The black-robed man's inexplicable disappearance made Elder Wu Peng secretly wary of Rong Xiao and Chu Luiyue. No one knew what other trump cards they had. At this time, it was best not to provoke them. Because of this, he spoke more politely than before. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. Originally, she was really not interested in their matters. However, when she saw how nervous they were, she felt a little curious. These people had a strong background and had high standards. Something that they cared so much about should be an incredible treasure, right? But curiosity was one thing. She wasn't in the mood to care about their matters now. Finding Taizu was the most important thing now. Therefore, Chu Luiyue didn't bother too much with them. Her lips curved slightly. It's best if we don't interfere with each other's business. We're not interested in your business, so I hope you'll take care of yourselves. After saying that, they really turned around, intending to leave. Elder Wu Peng and the others didn't believe it at first, but seeing that they were really going to leave like this, they were a little bewildered. Rong Xiao and the others. Did they really not know anything? Nan Yuxing secretly clenched his fists. Looking at their backs, a thick killing intent flashed across his eyes. Unfortunately, they were all injured, and Rong Xiao's strength was unfathomable. Otherwise, I should really let them stay here forever. He wouldn't let this matter go so easily. Once he left the god-slaying mound, he would definitely. Right. Rong Xiao paused and suddenly turned around to look at him. His deep and clear eyes landed directly on Nan Yuxing. Nan Yuxing's thoughts were instantly interrupted as he felt a chill enveloping his entire body. He couldn't help but shiver. What else do you want? He said fiercely. Rong Xiao's thin lips curled up slightly. Remember to greet Nan Yifan on behalf of I. After saying that, he turned around and continued to walk forward. Elder Wu Peng and the others were stunned and fell into a long silence. It wasn't until Rong Xiao and the others' figures gradually disappeared that Elder Bai Tong spoke in a low voice, breaking the silence. Could it be that Rong Xiao really knows the master? That wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that Rong Xiao's tone was too casual when he mentioned the master. It was as if he really didn't care about the master. It didn't look like he was faking it. At a time like this, what was the point of putting on an act? Unless he was really fearless. He dared to face the master directly. Nan Yuxing wanted to deny it, but he wasn't really a brainless person. He just had to think about it to know that Rong Xiao dared to do this for a reason. But why hadn't he heard father mention it before? Forget it. We'll talk about these things when we get back. Let's find the thing first and leave this place. Nan Yuxing said in frustration, but Rong Xiao's words before he left kept echoing in his ears, making him feel a little uneasy. After walking for some distance, Chu Ning looked back and asked, "What's the matter?" Who are they? It seemed that they were very hostile to you. And Rong Xiao, Chu Luiyue smiled. They're just some insignificant people. You don't have to care. Chu Ning saw that she looked relaxed, as if she really didn't care about those people. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. He patted Chu Luiyue's hand gently. That's good. His palm was very wide and thick, with calluses on it. It was a little rough, but it was exceptionally warm. Suddenly, Chu Luiyue was stunned and looked down. Father? Chu Ning didn't understand. Chu Luiyue grabbed his hand and looked at it for a while before asking curiously. Didn't you have a few wounds on your hand before? Why are they all gone now? She remembered clearly that those wounds were old and new, and 2 of them were especially serious. Even if he took medicine and recuperated well, according to her father's body, he would need a month to recover. But it had only been a while. Why were those wounds all gone? When Chu Ning heard that she was asking about this, he looked hesitant. In fact, he also knew that you had always been very meticulous. This matter couldn't be hidden from her for too long. It was just that he really didn't know how to say it. Father? Chu Luiyue saw his reaction and felt even more surprised. At the same time, she was a little worried. This matter was really abnormal. Could it be that father's body? Chu Ning saw that she was worried and hurriedly said, don't worry. Actually, this situation has happened several times. I'm already used to it. Several times? Hearing this, Chu Luiyue was even more shocked. Yes, that is, every time after I get injured, those wounds will recover on their own after a while. I don't know what's going on. Chu Luiyue carefully looked him up and down and was surprised to find that not only his hand, but the other wounds on his body also seemed to have recovered. This was, Rong Xiao suddenly said, Lord Chu Ning, can you let me take your pulse? Digression. 6 p.m. tomorrow. We will resume at 12 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1675. Chu Ning and Chu Luiyue glanced at each other. Chu Luiyue released his hand and asked, Do you know what's going on? Rong Xiao pondered for a moment. I'm not sure yet. As he spoke, Chu Ning had already extended his hand. Rong Xiao's well-defined fingers rested on his wrist. The surroundings were silent. Rong Xiao separated a portion of his force and injected it into Chu Ning's body. This force was like a stone thrown into a deep well, quickly disappearing in Chu Ning's body. Rong Xiao's brows moved slightly as he looked up at Chu Ning. Lord Chu Ning, your current martial artist rank is... Chu Ning's expression dimmed. Some time ago, I was seriously injured and my pill of origin was almost destroyed. My martial artist rank also fell back to rank 1. Now, I'm no different from a useless person. Ever since he was brought away from the empire of Yaochen, he had seen countless powerhouses. From then on, he knew that his little bit of strength was actually not enough in the outside world. Under such circumstances, he was unexpectedly seriously injured and became a rank 1 martial artist. He felt very embarrassed when he said it. You had grown so well now, but he, Chu Luiyue frowned. Fell back to rank 1, Daddy must have encountered an extremely dangerous situation before. Could it be that something happened that caused his body to become like this? To be able to recover so quickly, it seems that he's not an ordinary rank 1 martial artist. Rong Xiao released his hand and paused for a moment before asking again, Can you display a god territory now? Chu Luiyue was shocked, and his eyes widened slightly. Why did Rong Xiao suddenly ask this? Daddy has already fallen back to rank 1 martial artist. How can he have a god territory? However, Chu Ning did not immediately deny it. Instead, he frowned slightly and asked with some uncertainty. Like, the ones that you have summoned before? Rong Xiao nodded. Yes. After a moment of silence, Chu Ning actually nodded. I think there have been 2. But at that time I didn't know what it was, and it soon disappeared again. As he spoke, he hesitantly raised his hand. A streak of azure light slowly flew out. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly jumped. This was actually a divine domain. Even though she had seen many storms and waves, when she saw this scene at this time, she was still shocked on the spot and was unable to recover for a long time. Just a second ago, she was still immersed in the sad atmosphere of her father falling back to a rank 1 warrior, and in the blink of an eye, she saw him summoning a divine territory, who would be able to endure such a drop in status. Chu Luiyue forcefully closed his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, the divine domain was still lingering around Chu Ning and had not disappeared. Her throat tightened as she struggled to speak. This is, Father, your divine domain? Chu Luiyue's voice was floating when she said these few words. Chu Ning nodded. Previously, I didn't know what this was. It was only when I saw you fight with that person today that I found out that this was the divine region. Chu Ning really didn't know anything about this. When his strength reached its peak in the past, he was only a rank 5 warrior in the empire of Yaochen. And this strength was definitely considered top-notch in the entire empire of Yaochen. However, a divine domain could only be obtained after breaking through a rank 9 warrior and successfully becoming a god-rank powerhouse. How did he have the chance to know this? At most, he had only seen this term a few times in some biographies. However, to him, those were things that were extremely far away. He would never have thought that one day he would actually possess a divine domain, especially since his current strength was only at the first stage of the warrior realm. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes today, he would never have thought of himself. Looking at Chu Ning's blank face, Chu Luiyue was speechless. She suddenly felt that she was really not enough in front of her father. What was the big deal about being able to fight above his level? What was the big deal about being able to contract with a divine beast? Her father had become a rank 1 warrior and had a divine domain. What kind of operation was this? Chu Luiyue really didn't understand. In the past, it was only others who called her a pervert. Now, she felt that compared to her father, she was really inferior. Sensing the strange gazes of the few people, Chu Ning felt a little awkward. Actually, I don't know what's going on either. It's just that after I was injured that time, when I woke up again, it became like this. At that time, he was still sad for a long time because of the fall in his strength and didn't think about what this thing was at all. As expected, Rong Xiu's face revealed a look of relief as his thin lips curled up slightly. I still have to congratulate Lord Chu Ning for obtaining such an opportunity. Opportunity? Chu Luiyue and Chu Ning asked in unison. Rong Xiu nodded. If I'm not wrong, Lord Chu Ning should have obtained the indestructible divine body by chance. Chu Luiyue was shocked. Indestructible divine body. She had heard of this before. A few years ago at Lingxiao College, after she broke through to the divine level, she had been thinking about condensing a divine body. However, this matter was very complicated. Many divine-level powerhouses, even after crossing the threshold of the divine level, could not condense their own divine body in their lifetime. At that time, she didn't know what kind of divine body was most suitable for her, so she searched through Lingxiao College's library. She remembered that in an ancient scroll, there was a record of this divine body. The so-called indestructible divine body was an extremely special divine body. For ordinary cultivators, their original body and divine body were separated. However, cultivators with the indestructible divine body could directly change their own body into a divine body. In other words, such cultivators would only have one body from the beginning to the end. Compared to other cultivators who could separate divine bodies, this was indeed a disadvantage. However, the indestructible divine body had an incomparable advantage. This divine body had extremely tenacious vitality. As long as there was still a breath left, it could quickly recover. Chu Luiyue looked at Chu Ning. Previously, he had so many terrible wounds on his body, and they were serious. However, in this short period of time, those wounds had completely healed, and even a scar was hard to see. This was the indestructible divine body. But father is only a stage 1 warrior now. How could... Rong Xiu smiled and explained. Lord Chu Ning did not break through on his own, but he accidentally obtained some kind of opportunity and obtained the indestructible divine body. His original strength was not compatible with this. So I think that when he obtained the indestructible divine body, he automatically lowered his strength to that of a stage 1 warrior to make it easier for him to cultivate again. Also, Lord Chu Ning's Yuan Meridian level has been changed to the Tianjing Yuan Meridian. Rong Xiu raised his chin as he spoke. You can check his pulse yourself. Chu Luiyue actually believed his words, but she still could not help but go forward and check Chu Ning's pulse. After a moment, she released her hand with a shocked expression. When she looked at Chu Ning again, her gaze was very different from before. It really is the Tianjing Yuan Meridian. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1676. Chu Ning was stunned for a moment before he asked with uncertainty. Does this mean that I can continue to cultivate? Chu Luiyue didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Father, you can't just continue to cultivate. You've completely changed your fate. One had to know that even she hadn't forged her own divine body yet. She didn't expect her father to beat her to it. And it was such a precious and rare divine body. So, What if he was a stage 1 warrior now? With the Tianjing Yuan Meridian, was there a need to worry about cultivation? After going in a big circle, it turned out to be a joyous occasion. Chuning saw that she was happy and smiled. So, father can continue to help you or in the future? He had always been worried that he would become you or his burden. He didn't expect that the heavens would always leave a way out. Chu Luiyue was excited and touched. After knowing that he had the indestructible divine body, the first person her father thought of was still her. She took a deep breath and said, "I just want father to be well. Nothing else is important." She was really tormented during the time he was missing. She worried day and night, thinking about how to save him as soon as possible. When she thought about what kind of torture he would suffer, she was incomparably anxious. Chu Ning patted her head with heartache. Silly you were. Now that she had become so powerful, if he could only become her burden by staying by her side, it would be better to end it once and for all. Now he could finally put down this worry. After confirming this matter, the atmosphere suddenly became much more relaxed. Chu Ning also had a long-lost smile on his face. The few of them continued to walk forward. As they walked, Chu Luiyue asked some relevant questions. She really wanted to know what her father had gone through for him to have such a fortuitous encounter. Unfortunately, Chu Ning himself wasn't very clear. During the long period of being detained, he moved from place to place, but he never knew where he was. In addition, he had been suffering a lot of pain and suffering, and most of the time he was in a daze, so he couldn't remember many things clearly. Although he had experienced several life and death situations, he never cared. The only belief in his mind was to live on and see you. In addition, he didn't understand many things. Even if it happened to him, he didn't know. For example, his Yuan Meridian and his God domain. At the end of the conversation, Chu Luiyue could only vaguely guess that his father had obtained the indestructible divine body by chance in the God-Slayer mound. Also, it was the time when all the people from Junjiuqing were wiped out, and he lost contact with his father. Chu Luiyue could only sigh. The truth was indeed unpredictable. At that time, how could she have imagined that her father would have such a fortuitous encounter? The indestructible divine body might be related to some expert who died in the god-slaying mound. Rome Xiao said. Chu Luiyue thought about it and felt that this was the most likely guess. However, didn't they say that in the battle back then, all the experts were annihilated, leaving nothing behind? Rome Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly. Those are just rumors after all. As for what the truth was, other than the people from back then, no one should know. Chu Luiyue thought about it and agreed. In the past, countless experts had died in the Dahuang swamp. People who came later to obtain the inheritance almost came one after another. It didn't make sense that there was nothing in the god-slaying mound. Not to mention the others, didn't she get a lot of stones alone? Of course, they were very useful stones. And her father even had the indestructible divine body. Chu Luiyue didn't believe that this was really a barren land. Maybe someone didn't want others to come here to snatch the treasures, so they spread the news? Chu Luiyue guessed. Didn't those people say that they were looking for something here? What else could they be doing other than looking for treasures? Rome Xiao looked at her with appreciation. Some things didn't need to be said. She always understood. The god-slaying mound is extremely dangerous, and the evil spirit lingers for a long time. Most of the people who came in didn't return. Even those who knew there were treasures here didn't dare to act rashly. And those who didn't know wouldn't come either. That was why this place was so quiet. Chu Luiyue nodded. The treasures were good, but they needed to be alive to get them. But even if they couldn't get it now, it was a good idea to spread the news and reduce the curiosity and interest of the people. These people were really— Chu Luiyue shook her head. I think this place— She hesitated for a moment, but didn't finish her sentence. She changed the topic. When we find Taizu, we'll leave this place. Originally, they had only come here to save their father. It would be best if he could leave safely after he was done with the matter. Chu Ning paused and asked, You are this Taizu, is he? Chu Luiyue smiled. She was so busy asking her father that she didn't have time to tell him about her own things. I'll tell you slowly. At this moment, Chu Luiyue was telling Chu Ning about her background and experiences. On the other hand, Nan Yuxing and the others were not in a good mood. The atmosphere was cold and stagnant. Nan Yuxing frowned tightly. Elder Wu Peng, are you serious about what you just said? That thing is not here now. Elder Wu Peng looked at Nan Yi with a cold and solemn expression. Second Miss also has a certain sense of that thing, don't you think? Nan Yi's face turned ugly. It's indeed not here. Strange. I clearly felt it before. Why is it suddenly gone now? Elder Bai Tong couldn't help but ask. You mean that thing moved on its own? Digression. Tomorrow afternoon, please browse and read together. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1677. I don't think so. Nan Yi furrowed her brows, but her tone was uncertain. Father didn't mention this before. She thought that they would just make a trip here and casually find that thing and take it away. After all, there were very few people in the world who could find the traces of that thing, who knew that it would be so troublesome. Now that they had been searching for so long, they didn't even see a shadow. But that thing is not an ordinary item after all. Perhaps it has really changed places. As Elder Wu Peng spoke, he looked at Nan Yi. Second Miss, can you investigate more carefully and see if you can find any clues? He should have been the one to do this, but he had just used the Great Star Compass not long ago. He couldn't use it a second time in such a short time. Thus, he could only place his hopes on Nan Yi. Nan Yi pursed her lips. I'll try. The reason why her father insisted on letting her come was because she had a certain talent in this area. Now, it came in handy. However, every time she sensed something like this, her strength and mental strength would be greatly depleted. After that, she would feel very uncomfortable for a long time, so she usually didn't like to do this. But there was no other way now. Nan Yi closed her eyes and made a strange gesture with her hands in front of her. Then, a totem vaguely appeared between her brows. After a while, she slowly opened her eyes and pointed in a certain direction. Over there. Nan Yuxing looked satisfied. Yi is indeed amazing. Nan Yi couldn't help but look smug when she heard this. Of course. Although she was a little willful, she was still capable. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been doted on for so many years. After all, this was a world where strength was respected. Since we've confirmed the direction, let's go now. As Nan Yuxing spoke, he eagerly prepared to move forward. He really wanted to find that thing immediately and leave this place. However, Elder Bai Tong and Elder Wu Peng didn't move. Furthermore, the two of them had strange expressions on their faces. Nan Yuxing couldn't help but frown. Elders, why aren't you leaving? The two of them looked at each other and saw the complicated expression in each other's eyes. Elder Bai Tong said slowly, Eldest young master, don't you realize that something is wrong? Nan Yuxing was confused. Something was wrong. What was wrong with that? Hadn't he already sensed it? This proved that the thing was nearby. Elder Wu Peng said in a deep voice. The direction that second young mistress pointed to was the direction that Rong Xiao and the others left. Nan Yuxing was suddenly at a loss for words. His first reaction was to look at Nan Yi, his eyes filled with suspicion. Even though he didn't ask anything, the look in his eyes spoke volumes. Nan Yi instantly felt aggrieved. Brother.
What do you mean by that?
Are you doubting me? It took me a lot of effort to sense that weak aura. When Nan Yuxing saw how angry she was, he immediately dispelled the suspicion in his heart. No. Big brother just feels that it's a bit too much of a coincidence. Although his sister was a little willful and arrogant, she didn't have the guts to be impudent in such matters. If she didn't do it on purpose, does that mean that thing really moved in that direction? The thought of Rong Xiao and the others in front of him made Nan Yuxing feel uncomfortable. Of all places, why did it have to go there? Elder Wu Peng didn't doubt Nan Yi's judgment, but this matter still alerted him. Eldest young master, second young mistress, don't you think that ever since we came here, this series of events is indeed too much of a coincidence? Previously, I used the Star Catcher Great Plate to deduce the direction it pointed to. At that time, Rong Xiao and the others were here. Now that they've left, second young mistress sensed that the thing is also in the direction they left. Wu Peng, do you mean that that thing has been following Rong Xiao and the others? Elder Bai Tong's pupils constricted. Or is it actually with them? The moment he said this, the few of them fell into dead silence. Without a doubt, this was the outcome they didn't want to see. That's impossible, right? Nan Yi was also a little flustered. How can there be no movement at all if they want to subdue that thing? Besides, they've only been here for such a short time. How could they do it? Before coming, her father was worried that she wouldn't be able to handle it alone, so he asked her big brother and the two elders to accompany her. He also repeatedly instructed her that even if she would suffer a little during the process, she had to persevere until she brought the thing back intact. But what was going on now? Elder Wu Peng pondered for a moment and finally said, "No matter what, I'm afraid we have to keep up with them first. If everything is just a misunderstanding, then it's easy to deal with. If it's really them..." He didn't need to say the rest, and the few of them knew what he meant. At that time, a fierce battle would be inevitable. I think they're very vigilant. We have to be careful. Unless it's absolutely necessary, don't face them head-on. Elder Bai Tong thought about it for a long time before he decided to say these words. Seeing that Nan Yuxing's expression was getting uglier, he quickly added, "After all, our main goal this time is to find that thing. Everything else can be put aside for the time being." Nan Yuxing clenched his fists. "Let's go." Chu Liyue revealed her true identity and told Chu Ning a lot of things that happened after they parted. Even though she had already made it brief enough, Chu Ning was still shocked to the core when he heard it. The princess of the Tianling dynasty, the last disciple of the dean of Lingxiao College, a high god expert who was less than 20 years old. All of this came out of Chu Liyue's mouth extremely casually. But Chu Ning knew that behind these seemingly calm words, there were countless stormy waves. He had long guessed that her identity was extraordinary, but when he heard it for himself, he was still deeply shocked. And Rong Xiao's true identity made him unable to calm down for a long time. The son of Saint of the Yuntian Tower, a peerless genius who was no weaker than you. What surprised him the most was that he had already fallen in love with you, a few years ago. No wonder he took good care of you, from the beginning. After Chu Liyue finished speaking, Chu Ning took a long time to digest all the information. "So, the person we are looking for now is your real Taizu?" Chu Liyue nodded slightly. "Taizu has always taken good care of me. This time, he insisted on coming with me because he was worried about me. But not long after we came in, we got separated." Hearing that he was someone who treated you, well, Chu Ning immediately became worried. "This is extremely dangerous. Do you have any way of contacting him?" Chu Liyue smiled and comforted. "Don't worry. Taizu has been here before, so there shouldn't be." Boom! A loud sound suddenly came from the distant sky. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1678. Chu Liyue's voice stopped abruptly, and she quickly looked up. It was evening, and the sun was setting in the west. The last arc was gradually hidden in the thick clouds. The sky was filled with a warm orange color, as if the whole sky was plated with a layer of gold. In the Gotslang tomb, such a bright and brilliant scene was extremely rare. However, below that, the place where the sky and the earth met was covered by a faint shadow. Even the afterglow of the sun could not penetrate it. From afar, it looked like a piece of black that had been stagnant for a long time, with a kind of cold and lonely aura. Gradually, Chu Liyue found that the piece of black seemed to be expanding, and the loud sound just now seemed to have come from that place. However, it didn't sound like thunder. At such a distance, it was faint and could not be heard clearly. "What is that?" Chu Liyue frowned slightly. This aura was really not right. Chu Ning suddenly said, "That's a wall." Chu Liyue was stunned and turned to look at him. "A wall?" Chu Ning nodded, his eyes fixed on the piece of black in the distance, his face solemn. "Yes. I have seen this wall twice before, and this is the third time." As he spoke, Chuning raised his hand and pointed to the left and right sides of the piece of black. This wall will spread from one end to the other, and in a quarter of an hour, it will occupy the entire horizon, as far as we can see. Chu Lua looked in the direction of his finger and found that the piece of black was indeed spreading rapidly to both sides. At this time, she could vaguely see that it was indeed a wall. It was completely black, solemn and majestic and unapproachable. Before she got close, she seemed to be able to feel the murderous aura on it. She frowned secretly. Such a strong aura would not appear for no reason. "Father, how often does this wall appear? Did it suddenly appear like this the last 2 times? Chu Ning shook his head. "It doesn't appear at a fixed time. So far, I have only seen it 3 times, and before, my physical and mental state was not very good, so I did not pay much attention to it. I only know that each time, it appears at sunset and disappears at dawn. It never appears during the day." He paused for a moment before he added, "When I first saw this wall, I had just been exiled here. At that time, I thought that I could leave this place by crossing the wall, so I tried my best to go there, but before I reached it, it was already dawn, and it disappeared directly. Later, I knew that it had nothing to do with whether I could get out or not, so I did not pay attention to it." Chu Lua nodded, looking at a mountain. Although from here, the wall did not seem to be very far. But if they really wanted to walk to it, it would a lot of effort. However, why would a wall suddenly appear out of nowhere in this place? There were too many strange things in this god-slaying mound. Just as she was about to wait and see, a stone suddenly jumped out of the ring of cosmos and rolled to Chu Luyue's feet. Chu Luyue lowered her head. The stone rolled forward a little. Chu Luyue raised her eyebrows high, but her feet did not move. Soon, the second stone jumped out, also touched her feet, and then rolled forward. This time, it went farther than the previous one, but in the same direction, toward the wall in the sky. When the third stone jumped out, Chu Luyue finally spoke. "You want me to go there?" The stone could not speak, but this series of actions could not be more obvious. Chu Luyue touched her chin. She knew that they would not harm her. Since they were so eager to urge her to go there, there should be a reason. Seeing this scene, Chu Ning's eyes flashed with a touch of surprise. In fact, he had heard Chu Luyue briefly mention the origin of these stones before. And in the battle between Chu Luyue and the black-robed man, he had seen clearly the amazing power contained in these stones. But at this time, when he saw it again, he could not help but feel strange. "It seems that they really want you to go there," Rome Xiao said with a slight smile. Chu Luyue spread her hands and smiled helplessly. "I can see that, too. But it is really far away, and I can't sense anything now. In this place, the unknown often means danger. If it is really dangerous, we can retreat when the time comes. Since we can see this wall, Senior Shengguan should be able to see it, too. Perhaps he will appear there and wait to meet up with us." Rong Xiu's words made Chu Liyue's eyes light up. Right. She had almost forgotten this point. The boundless wilderness was vast and boundless. At a glance, all the scenery was the same. Without experience, it would be difficult to even distinguish the direction here, let alone find a person. That was indeed no different from looking for a needle in a haystack. If Taizu was safe and sound, it was very likely that they would do that. Chu Liyue made up her mind. Then let's go take a look first. If they could arrive before dawn and find Taizu, that would be the best. If not, they would find another way. Chu Liyue did not dare to have too much hope. That was because the wall on the horizon was still spreading to both sides. The more so it was, the wider it covered, and the slimmer the chance of successfully meeting up with Taizu. However, even if there was only a glimmer of hope, Chu Liyue was unwilling to give up. She put away the stone and walked forward. At the same time, Shengguan Jing was also walking towards the wall. He had been walking for a long time and had consumed a lot of his god conduit power, but he had only shortened a portion of the distance. He clearly felt that the wall was in front of him, but he could not touch it. Fortunately, it was not his first time here, nor was it his first time encountering such a situation, so his emotions were very stable. He just kept moving forward. Calculating the time, and the others should have seen the wall by now. It was just that he did not know if they were on his side or on the opposite side. If they were on the same side, it would be fine, but if they were on the opposite side, it would be extremely difficult to see them. Shang Guanjing stopped in his tracks and took a deep breath. After calming down a little, he continued to move forward. The last ray of light gradually dissipated. Dusk finally fell. In the dark, one's eyesight would often become very poor, especially on such a starless and moonless night. However, the miraculous thing was that Chu Luiyue could still see the black wall clearly. It was a different kind of black. It was rich, solemn, serious, and unattainable. It stood quietly between heaven and earth, as if it had existed for tens of thousands of years. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1679. This was a very subtle feeling that couldn't be described in words. But as long as one looked up and saw the thick black, one would unconsciously feel this way. Gradually, Chu Luiyue's worried heart calmed down. There seemed to be an invisible force that made her feel inexplicably at ease. Noticing this, Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes. Strange, this feeling was really strange. Originally, she was a little repulsed and uneasy to get close to the wall. But now, the closer she got, the calmer she became. In fact, there was even a faint sense of familiarity. She didn't know where this feeling came from, but she didn't reject it. Was it because of the stones she collected before? After all, they had been here for tens of thousands of years, so they should be very familiar with everything here. But Chu Luiyue still felt that something was wrong. She felt that she seemed to have overlooked something important, but she couldn't remember it for a while. These messy thoughts kept flashing in Chu Luiyue's mind. But she didn't stop walking. At a certain moment, Chu Luiyue finally noticed that there was a slight change in the void in front of her. She stopped in her tracks and reached out her hand. With her finger as the center, several ripples spread out in all directions. This is a boundary, Chu Luiyue said with certainty. Moreover, the pressure on it didn't seem weak. Because it was transparent, and at night, it was even harder to detect. She only felt that something was wrong when she got close. But this boundary didn't seem to be a threat. Rongxiu took her hand and waved his sleeve, and the boundary in front of them instantly dispersed. He walked in front, raised his eyebrows slightly, and smiled carelessly. Maybe it's the collision of the many forces left in the god-slaying mound, and the turbulence of the void surged, inadvertently forming a boundary. It's nothing to worry about. Chu Luiyue nodded in agreement. Wasn't Taizu swept away by a turbulence of the void? Here, the forces accumulated for tens of thousands of years were constantly intertwined, so it was normal for such a situation to occur. Moreover, she didn't sense any threat from the boundary. She quickly put this matter behind her and continued to walk forward. Around half an hour after they left, a few more figures showed up at the same place. It was Nanyu Xing and the others. They didn't look good, especially Elder Bai Tong, whose face was particularly pale. His calf was cut off, and now he could only walk with one leg. Along the way, he was undoubtedly the one who had suffered the most. Even though he had used top-notch medicinal pills to keep himself alive, his injuries were too severe. Moreover, it was impossible for him to regrow half of his calf in a short period of time. Suffering was unavoidable. Elder Wu Peng glanced at him and said, "Why don't we take a break?" "No." Elder Bai Tong hurriedly rejected this suggestion with a guilty expression. "They're not slow. Because of me, we've already lagged behind for a while. If we rest now, I'm afraid we'll be delayed even more." Elder Wu Peng frowned, but he had to admit that what he said was the truth. What are they planning to do? It's so late at night. Are they going to keep walking without resting? Nanyu Xing was also very dissatisfied. Although his injuries were lighter than Elder Bai Tong's, he really couldn't take it anymore. At first, they were worried that they would be discovered by Rongxiu and the others if they got too close. But later, they realized that they were thinking too much. Because with their current speed, it was already very difficult for them to not lose them. How could they care about anything else? What was even more hateful was that at this time, those people still didn't stop. Who could stand it if this continued? Elder Wu Peng looked at Nan Yi. Second miss. What's the result of your investigation? Nan Yi pursed her lips. That thing has indeed been following them. At this point, it was almost certain that the thing was with them. Although it sounded unbelievable, but Nan Yi had followed them all the way, so it was impossible for her to be wrong. This also meant that they had to catch up with Rong Xiao and the others and take the opportunity to take back the thing. If they were at their peak, it might not be too much of a problem, but the key was now. Even if they joined forces, they probably wouldn't be a match for Rong Xiao and the others. Nan Yi paced back and forth in frustration. If I had known this would happen, I would have asked Father to send more people over. Before she could finish speaking, she suddenly felt her body become heavy, as if a heavy object was pressing down on her shoulders. Her low exclamation immediately attracted the attention of the few people. Second miss. Nan Yi gritted her teeth and barely managed to stand firm. She then looked up in panic and looked around. Several ripples gently spread out, as if forming a huge cage, trapping her within. No, it wasn't just her. Elder Wu Peng and the others were also included in this range. This is a barrier, Elder Wu Peng shouted in a deep voice. At the same time, he waved his sleeves, wanting to bring Nan Yi out. However, the surrounding space became heavy and stagnant, and every movement became incomparably difficult. The moment he moved, it was as if there were countless invisible hands pulling him crazily, trapping him in place. Elder Wu Peng knew that something was wrong. He quickly mobilized the force in his body, but it was still in vain. Nan Yuxing and Elder Bai Tong were also trapped. They were trapped in this strange barrier, just like that. Every step forward became extremely difficult. What's going on? Nan Yuxing was anxious and panicked. When Rong Xiao and the others passed by just now, everything was normal. Such a situation didn't happen at all. Elder Wu Peng gritted his teeth and said, "The surrounding energy of heaven and earth is chaotic, causing this situation. I'm afraid it'll be difficult to break free for a while." Even he couldn't break free? Nan Yuxing's heart sank. Then why do Rong Xiao and the others seem to be fine? They had seen those people pass through here with their own eyes. Elder Wu Peng's face was solemn, and his brows were tightly knitted. How could he not want to know why? Along the way, he had been walking at the front and saw the clearest. But from the beginning to the end, he didn't notice anything unusual. Who knew that there would be such a big problem here? He looked up and secretly gritted his teeth. This situation won't create any danger, but it will greatly slow down our speed. This time, I'm afraid we won't be able to catch up. How can this be? Nan Yuxing was anxious. Don't forget that it's very likely that that thing is in their hands. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1680. Nan Yi suddenly said, "Why don't we ask Uncle Luo Yan to come over?" As soon as he finished speaking, everyone in the room fell silent. Nan Yuxing asked hesitantly, I'm afraid it's not very appropriate, right? Uncle Luo Yan usually focuses on cultivation and never gets involved in the matters of the clan. Besides, this time, Father's original intention was to train you more. Only when you personally bring that thing back can you get the approval of everyone in the clan. If we let Uncle Luo Yan off when we go back, there will be some people whispering. Then do we have any other way now? Nan Yi was also full of anger, and her attitude became more and more impatient. She didn't want to make this trip in the first place, and now she had suffered so much. Actually, it was just a matter that her father could solve by sending a few more people over. Why did he have to make it so troublesome? Do we have to all get into trouble here before we can let this matter rest? Second miss. These words are inauspicious, and you can't say them carelessly. Elder Bai Tong hurriedly said. You and eldest young master will definitely be successful. Nan Yi turned her face away and sneered in her heart. Now that the situation was like this, what was there to talk about? Whether they could return safely was a big problem. Nan Yuxing's face was tense, and he hesitated for a long time. Actually, he also knew that the current situation was almost a hopeless situation. If they didn't find someone, they might really not be able to complete the mission and return. However, inviting Uncle Luo Yan over was a little inappropriate. Big brother, Uncle Luo Yan has always doted on me the most. I'm asking him to save me, not to help me find that thing. Can I do that? Nan Yi's words finally made Nan Yuxing relent. Okay. It was already late at night. The wilderness was dark and terrifyingly silent. Only the sound of the wind kept brushing past their ears, bringing with it a hint of coldness. Chu Liyue finally stopped in her tracks. She first turned around to take a look. It was quiet and there was no one around. She had finally gotten rid of those annoying shadows. She didn't know what Nan Yuxing and the others were thinking, but they seemed to be sticking to them along the way. At first, she thought she was overthinking, but later she realized that they were indeed tailing them. Although they had been very careful, Chu Liyue was carrying so many stones on his body. He was very sensitive to his surroundings, so how could he not notice them? It was just that she wanted to find Taizu first, so she couldn't be bothered with them. Fortunately, she was in the right place at the right time. She used some tricks and successfully shook them off. Chu Liyue let out a sigh of relief as he finally had some peace and quiet. Then, he retracted his gaze and looked forward. At that moment, they were only 100 zhang away from the wall. Standing there, he could already see the rough appearance of the wall. Solemn, dignified, simple, and bloody. After taking a look, these words instantly surfaced in Chu Liyue's mind. Huge black stone bricks were piled up in a neat and orderly manner. Even though it had been eroded by the passage of time and was mottled, it was not difficult to see the grandeur of the past. The wall was very high. When Chu Liyue looked up, she could barely see the top. At a glance, it was as if the wall was connected to the sky. Moreover, the wall extended to the left and right. It was a long road with no end in sight. Chu Liyue and the others stood there, as small as ants. Why is there such a wall in the god-slaying tomb? Chu Liyue murmured, frowning slightly. Also, this place is filled with a strong murderous aura. It was the place with the most terrifying murderous aura ever since she entered the god-slaying tomb. Standing so far away, she could feel the terrifying murderous aura coming at her, almost tearing her apart. This wall was left behind in the shocking battle back then, Su Ke said. He suddenly spoke. His voice was cold and calm, as if he was telling a distant story in a yellowed ancient book, with a trace of obscurity. Chu Liyue turned around. You're saying this wall has been around since then? Rongxiu nodded, looking at her eyes full of curiosity. His thin lips curved into a faint smile. It is said that the two sides didn't want to fight to the death back then, so they agreed to divide and conquer. Unfortunately, the battles still broke out later. The location of this wall became a very famous place where the battle was fought to the death back then. I see, Chu Liyue nodded. No wonder the wall was so imposing and filled with a strong murderous aura. It was indeed related to the battle back then. Speaking of this, she was even more curious. To be able to attract so many strong people to gather here and die one after another, is it really just because of a book? Rongxiu lowered his eyes slightly. It is normal for people to die for wealth and birds to die for food. Chu Liyue touched her chin. Then who won in the end? And whose hands did the book fall into? Rongxiu shook his head. I heard that the casualties on both sides were shocking, but who got the book in the end has become an eternal secret. Chu Liyue felt a little regretful when she heard this. But after all, this was something that happened tens of thousands of years ago, and the descendants indeed had no way to know. She put away her thoughts, turned her wrist, and took out the long yuan sword. Although she didn't use the long yuan sword much now, Taizu had been here for thousands of years and had left his aura long ago. Now it was convenient for her to find him. Chu Liyue held her breath and began to carefully check the surroundings. She didn't find anything. She was not discouraged. As she walked forward, she kept trying to find Taizu's trace. It was not easy to find a person in such a big place. Even if Taizu also saw the wall and came here, he might not be in the same place and at the same time as them. After a while, Chu Liyue thought of something and released those stones from the Ring of Cosmos. These stones rolled in all directions. After all, they were objects that had existed here for tens of thousands of years. With them, Chu Liyue could undoubtedly expand her range of perception again. After a while, a low sound of a string suddenly came into her ears. Chu Liyue was startled and looked up subconsciously. The sound seemed to be coming from that wall. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1681. Chu Liyue took a few steps forward, but the sound was still very far away, as if it came from a very far place, faintly discernible. It was like a feather gently brushing across her heart, tickling her. Chu Liyue stepped forward again, her eyes fixed on the black wall. Seeing her actions and expression, Chu Ning suddenly asked, what are you doing? Chu Liyue was stunned and came back to her senses. Looking at Chu Ning's expression, she suddenly realized something. Father, didn't you hear anything? Chu Ning was at a loss. What sound? I didn't hear anything. Chu Liyue frowned. Come closer and listen more carefully. Chu Ning walked over and stood beside her, listening attentively. After a moment, he still shook his head. No. He didn't hear anything. Chu Liyue suddenly had a subtle feeling in her heart. Was it because her father was only a stage 1 warrior and his hearing wasn't as good as hers, so he couldn't hear it? She looked at Rong Xiao. The two of them looked at each other. Rong Xiao asked, what did you hear? Chu Liyue's heart sank slightly. You can't hear it either? Rong Xiao nodded. Chu Liyue pursed her lips. It would be fine if her father couldn't hear it alone, but now, even Rong Xiao, who was stronger, couldn't hear it. Was she really the only one who could hear it? She closed her eyes to make sure it wasn't an illusion. Although the sound was low and indistinct, it was real. She paused for a moment before saying, I heard it. It sounded like someone was playing the zither. The sound was pleasant and moved one's heart. The rhythm was light and slow, but it was very captivating. That sound came from inside the wall. Chu Liyue said and walked forward. The closer she got to the wall, the more intense and crazy the murderous aura was. But perhaps because of the stones, Chu Liyue didn't feel too uncomfortable. She quickly adapted to the environment. Chu Ning and Rong Xiao followed. Rong Xiao was fine, but Chu Ning's face quickly turned pale. Although he now had the indestructible divine body, his strength as a martial artist was indeed only at rank 1. This point was irrefutable. Apart from having an advantage in terms of divine body, there was still a big gap between him and ordinary high gods in other aspects. Chu Liyue said, Father, you don't need to come over. I went back after I figured out what was going on with this thing. Tuanzi, you go and keep her company. Tuanzi nodded obediently and ran to Chu Ning's side, holding his hand. Grandpa Chu, I'm coming. Chu Ning already knew Dumpling's true identity, but every time he saw her cute little face, he would forget about it. Only love and affection were left in his eyes. He hurriedly said, good. Dumpling is the most obedient. He patted Dumpling's head gently. He liked it very much. But on second thought, he said, Grandpa Chu is fine. Grandpa Chu is fine. Tuanzi, you'd better go to Yuer. He felt that the closer they were to the wall, the more dangerous it was. And Yuer said that she heard something. He couldn't help but worry. Tuanzi opened her mouth and smiled brightly. It's fine. His Highness is with Ayu. Rong Xiao stopped in his tracks. His thin lips curled into a satisfied smile. This child is teachable. Chu Ning heard this and felt that it made sense. He also nodded. Holding Dumpling's little hand, they waited together. Chu Liyue finally stopped in front of the wall. Standing close to it, all the marks on the wall could be seen clearly. Countless knife and sword marks had gradually blurred over the years. Only deep and shallow marks were left, mottled and intertwined. She could even smell a faint smell of blood. Mixed with wind, frost, and dust, it inexplicably carried a sense of desolation and tragedy. Chu Liyue's mood also became heavy. She stared in front of her in a daze. Countless emotions seemed to surge in her heart. But she couldn't describe the specifics. He could only allow these complicated emotions to continuously surge in his chest and abdomen. She stretched out her hand and slowly placed it on the wall. It was cold, rough, and heavy to the touch. However, the sound of the zither suddenly became clear.
Down, down, down.
It all fell into her ears and smashed into her heart. In the dark, she seemed to see a figure standing alone in the lonely and cold wilderness. She couldn't see the figure and appearance of the person clearly. She didn't even know whether the person was a man or a woman. She only saw the person holding the zither in his arms and gently plucking the strings with his fingers. And the sound of the zither flew out from under the person's hand. The sound of the zither, which was supposed to be light and cheerful, inexplicably carried a trace of desolation. The world was dark, and the wind and clouds moved. In the emptiness, there was only one person accompanied by the zither. Time passed slowly. The speed of the person's fingers plucking the strings gradually increased. The originally boundless and distant sound was suddenly tainted with a trace of killing intent. The sound of the zither clanged. In an instant, the world seemed to change color. Chu Liyue's heart suddenly felt as if it was tightly gripped by something. The sound of the zither became more urgent. In an instant, it was as if she saw the shadows of knives and swords, and blood splattered everywhere. Chu Liyue suddenly felt a sweet and fishy taste in her mouth. "You." Rongxiu's clear and low voice suddenly echoed in her ears. She suddenly came back to her senses. Rongxiu had already grabbed her hand and retreated from the wall.
Clang.
The sound of the zither stopped. Everything disappeared without a trace. Chu Liyue's body trembled, and she suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Digression. Today is the winter solstice, eating dumplings or glutinous rice balls. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1682. You. Chu Ning and Dumpling were both shocked. Chu Liyue didn't look any different before, so no one expected her to vomit blood all of a sudden. Chu Liyue shook her head. "I'm fine." Rongxiu took out a snow-white handkerchief and helped her wipe the blood from the corner of her mouth. At the same time, he injected his force into Chu Liyue's body to help her sort out the violent force. Rongxiu only withdrew his force when her breath gradually calmed down, but he didn't let go of her hand. Chu Liyue held his hand and gave him a reassuring look.
"I'm really fine.
It's just that I wasn't paying attention just now, so the force in my body went berserk." But fortunately, Rongxiu acted in time and stopped the movement before it could cause a commotion. Although she vomited blood, her body wasn't affected too much. Rongxiu had personally checked her body's condition and knew that she was telling the truth. He was relieved. However, that pair of deep phoenix eyes were still filled with a biting cold aura. Just now, what happened? This was also what Chu Ning and Dumpling wanted to know the most. Chu Liyue breathed a sigh of relief. Although she felt that the encounter just now was a little strange and unreal, she decided to tell the truth in the end. "I heard someone playing the zither just now." Then, she told him everything that she had felt just now. Chu Ning frowned. Dumpling looked worried. Rongxiu narrowed his eyes and seemed to be deep in thought. No one knew what he was thinking. That zither sound seemed to have a magical power that made people involuntarily indulge in it. And as time passed, the zither sound became more and more urgent and murderous. "Just now I was careless, so..." Chu Liyue suddenly paused when she said this. "Father, Rongxiu, did you really not hear anything?" Rongxiu looked up slightly and said in a gentle but firm tone,
"No."
At this moment, Chu Liyue saw a figure flash out of the corner of his eye. It was Chu Ning who was walking towards him quickly. The baleful aura here was very thick, and it was very difficult for him to walk. After a few steps, his forehead was covered with sweat, and his lips gradually turned pale. "Father?" Chu Luiyue was a little surprised. Just as she was about to stop her, Chu Ning had already gritted her teeth and walked to her side. He let out a long sigh, then reached out his hand toward the wall without hesitation. Father. Chu Luiyue was shocked and immediately reached out to stop him. Chu Ning shook his head. Don't worry. Father only came to take a look to see if there's anything strange about this place. Just watching from the side made him feel uneasy. Especially when he saw that she was injured, he felt even worse. Anyway, Daddy has a divine body now, so I'm not afraid of getting hurt. Chu Luiyue's heart warmed, and he didn't say anything else. Chu Ning placed his hand on the black wall. After a long while, he loosened his grip, and there was a hint of disappointment in his eyes. Obviously, he still didn't hear anything. Chu Luiyue wasn't surprised by this result. What she found strange was, why was she the only one who could hear the sound of the zither? Moreover, when she placed her hand on the wall, the sound of the zither immediately became clear, as if it was echoing in her ears. When she let go of her hand, this feeling quickly disappeared. She held her breath and concentrated, but she could still hear the faint sound in her ears. It was just that the melody became slow and low again, and there was no longer any trace of the murderous aura it had before. If it weren't for the lingering taste of blood between her lips and teeth, Chu Luiyue would almost think that everything just now was just an illusion. This wall is very strange. We should be careful. Chu Ning frowned. Chu Luiyue's lips moved, but seeing his worried expression, she finally nodded. Your nose. When we find Taizu, we'll leave here immediately. Just like that, they began to wait in place. Chu Luiyue distributed the stones. If there was any movement within a radius of dozens of miles, she would be able to detect it immediately. The night was dark and silent. Rongxiu stood guard and set up a barrier around them, blocking that terrifying murderous aura outside. Chu Luiyue sat cross-legged and began to regulate her breath. Chu Ning, on the other hand, sat beside her and began to concentrate on his cultivation. Dumpling opened her eyes wide, crossed her arms, and stared angrily at the wall, as if she wanted to pierce through it with her eyes. What the hell was this thing that made Ayu vomit blood? If Ayu hadn't stopped her, she would have smashed this wall. Time slowly passed. In the darkness of the night, the wall stood silently between the heavens and the earth. However, for Chu Luiyue, she couldn't completely calm down, because she could still hear the sound of the zither. It was illusory, and it was faintly discernible. She tried to temporarily shut off her hearing, but it was useless. The sound of the zither continued to linger in her mind, unable to be erased. Suddenly, a stone rolled to her feet. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. She opened her eyes and looked ahead. A familiar aura was gradually approaching. That was Taizu? Chu Luiyue was surprised and delighted. She immediately stood up. Sensing her actions, the rest of the people looked over. Chu Luiyue suppressed the excitement in her heart and said, Taizu should be nearby. Hearing this, Chu Ning also stood up and asked happily, Really? Then can you find the specific location? Because she knew that Chu Luiyue was very concerned about this matter, Chu Ning was also very happy to see that there was progress. Chu Luiyue's lips curled up. I only sense the aura of Taizu. I still need to investigate more. However, it shouldn't be too far away. As she spoke, she closed her eyes and waved her hands in front of her. Whoosh! The scattered stones around began to gather towards her quickly, and their movement also brought about subtle changes in the surrounding spatial energy. Chu Luiyue's divine consciousness began to spread into the distance. Even with her eyes closed, she could still clearly see the surrounding scene. Taizu's aura was also approaching. At a certain moment, she finally determined a certain direction and opened her eyes again. However, at this moment, her expression became much more complicated. Rongxiu narrowed his eyes, as if he had already guessed something. Chu Ning was still a little puzzled. What's wrong?
Did you find it?
Chu Luiyue nodded and frowned slightly. Chu Ning was even more confused. Since you found it, why do you still look so worried? Then where is Senior Shengguan now? Should we go over directly? Chu Luiyue pursed her lips. After a while, she exhaled softly. I'm afraid it's a little difficult. She raised her hand and enunciated each word clearly. Taizu seems to be behind that wall. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1683. This was going to be difficult. It didn't take much thought to know that it would be extremely difficult to cross this wall. On the one hand, the wall was too tall and cultivators couldn't fly here. Even if they could fly with the help of a divine artifact, they might not succeed. Chu Luiyue didn't forget that Rong Xiao had already mentioned that this wall was built to divide the two worlds. How could a wall that had existed for tens of thousands of years be so easy to cross? On the other hand, the wall stretched on endlessly. There was no end in sight to the left or the right. It was impossible to even think about going around it. Even if they were only separated by a wall from the Taizu, it wouldn't be that easy to meet them. Then this. Chuning instantly understood Chu Luiyue's concerns and frowned. You mean we have to find a way to cross? Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment. If the Taizu can cross, it'll be the same. The important thing was that this was easy to say, but it was difficult to do. Even if the Taizu were a venerable god expert, Chu Luiyue couldn't guarantee that he could deal with this wall. The ground beneath their feet had once buried countless venerable gods and venerable gods. In that earth-shattering battle, the gods fell, but this wall had withstood tens of thousands of years of wind, frost, and rain. Just this point alone was enough to see many problems. In this place, people like them were no more than ants. Chu Luiyue rubbed the space between his eyebrows, feeling a headache coming on. How did that spatial turbulence bring the Taizu to the other side? Forget it. Let's get in touch with the Taizu first. With that, Chu Luiyue walked up to the wall again. Taizu? She called out twice, but there was no response. Chu Luiyue could clearly sense that the distance between them and the Taizu was still shrinking. If she guessed correctly, the Taizu should be moving toward this wall right now. However, she didn't know if the Taizu could hear her through this wall. Chu Luiyue paused for a moment and then raised her voice again. Taizu? After shouting this time, Chu Luiyue took out the long yuan sword and rhythmically knocked on the wall with the sword hilt. Just when Chu Luiyue thought that this method wouldn't work, a familiar voice finally came from the other side. You are? It was the Taizu. Chu Luiyue's eyes. Taizu. It's me. I can't hear you. They could hear each other's voices. You are. Shengguan Jing held the wall with one hand. Even though he was exhausted and his legs were trembling, he still couldn't suppress the joy in his heart at this moment. Yuati originally, he only had a glimmer of hope, but he didn't expect that. Are you alright? Shengguan Jing asked hurriedly. They hadn't been separated for a long time, but the god-slaying tomb was full of danger. If they were careless, they would fall into trouble. During this period of time, he had been on tenterhooks, afraid that something would happen to them. I'm fine. Rong Xiao has been with me. Furthermore, I've already found father and brought him back safely. Chu Luiyue knew that he was worried, so she immediately told him everything briefly and quickly. And that person has been taken care of by us. Although the process was a little complicated, the result was good. Shengguan Yu heaved a sigh of relief and slowly sat down with the support of the wall. That's good. At this moment, Chu Luiyue heard that his voice was tired and weak. It seemed that the situation wasn't very good. She frowned. Taizu, how are you? The great ancestor silently exhaled a long breath and perked up. I'm fine. I just walked for a long time. I'll be fine after resting for a while. Chu Luiyue was still very worried. Ever since Taizu's divine body woke up, he had never been in such a tired and weak state. Coupled with the fact that she couldn't see him with her own eyes, Chu Luiyue was even more worried. Taizu, do you know of any way to cross this wall? As long as they could successfully meet up, they could leave this place first and slowly recuperate after going back. Taizu paused for a moment and smiled bitterly. I don't know. Although he had been here before and seen this wall, He really didn't know how to deal with it. He had been worried that he would be separated from Chu Luyue and the others along the way, but in the end, Chu Luyue heard the helplessness in his voice, and her heart sank. If even Taizu couldn't do anything, things would be even more troublesome. Have a good rest first. We'll stay here with you. As for the way, there will definitely be a way. Chu Luyue comforted. Taizu's lips moved, but in the end, he swallowed the words in his throat.
Okay.
A wall with people on both sides. They fell into a cold silence. Chu Luyue crossed her arms and began to think hard. She had a feeling that there should be a way to solve this problem. I've seen this wall from afar before. It appeared in the evening and disappeared at dawn. Chu Ning suddenly said, Maybe we don't need to do anything. We just need to wait here for dawn? Chu Luyue was stunned. That's right. How could she forget about this? Chu Ning had indeed mentioned this before, but she didn't take it to heart at that time. Now that she thought about it, if this wall could really disappear after daybreak, then they would be able to meet up with the great ancestor without any effort? She looked up at the sky. The night was dark. However, there didn't seem to be much time left until dawn. She nodded. Then let's wait and see. Hearing this, Rong Xiu's eyes moved slightly as he looked meaningfully at the wall. However, he quickly retracted his gaze as if nothing had happened. Since they had confirmed that Taizu was on the other side, they obviously couldn't rest. They began to wait in silence. Waiting seemed to be especially unbearable. This was especially so for Chu Luyue, because she found that as time passed, the sound of the zither that constantly echoed in her ears seemed to gradually become clearer. Even if all her attention was on Taizu, she still couldn't make the sound of the zither disappear from her ears. But fortunately, that biting cold killing intent didn't appear again. Because she was afraid that Chu Ning and Rong Xiu would be worried, she didn't mention this matter again. Her expression was normal as she waited for dawn with them. Finally, the thick and dark sky gradually faded from the thick layer of black, gradually turning into a dark blue. A ray of white appeared on the horizon. After that, the bright glow of the morning sun gradually dyed half of the sky into different warm colors. Chu Luyue slowly clenched her hands and looked at the wall again. The morning light sprinkled down gently, revealing a heavy and ancient aura. Chu Luyue's heart gradually sank to the bottom of the valley. It didn't disappear. It didn't move. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1684. A chill suddenly rose from the soles of her feet and went straight to the top of her head. The cold air enveloped Chu Luyue's entire body. The mottled black wall became clearer under the sunlight. Chu Ning was also shocked. How could this be? It was clear that this wall would disappear after daybreak. Today, it seems that I have to think of another way. Chu Luyue pondered for a moment and finally chose to accept reality. Although she didn't know why the wall didn't disappear, she vaguely felt that it seemed to have something to do with the sound of the zither she heard. But now she didn't have any evidence, so it was naturally hard to say. Chu Luyue took a step forward. Taizu, are you okay? Shengguan Jing also didn't sleep for the whole night. However, after a night of recuperation, his body had almost recovered, and his voice sounded much more robust. I'm fine. Don't worry. Chu Luyue thought for a moment and asked, Taizu, what if we go out separately and meet outside the god-slaying tomb? Shengguan Jing sighed. How could he not know what Chu Luyue meant by asking this question? It was too difficult to cross the wall and meet her. It would be good if they could meet outside. But the key was, there are countless entrances and exits in the god-slaying tomb. And there are countless void turbulences in the middle. If you are careless, you will lose your way. Back then, I went directly to the northern region of the primordial world. If we go out separately, I'm afraid that it would take a lot of effort. Chu Luyue's head hurt even more. What Taizu said was what she was most worried about. The god-slaying tomb was too big. It was impossible to fly in the vast wilderness. Once they were separated, it would take a lot of time and energy to find each other. The sound of the zither in her mind seemed to be closer and lingered around, making Chu Luiyue more and more anxious.
Bang.
She gritted her teeth and punched the wall. What exactly, Buzz? A slight fluctuation suddenly came from his dantian. Chu Luiyue was startled for a moment, then immediately became spirited. This movement was the water droplet. Xiao narrowed his eyes when he noticed the change in her expression. What's wrong? Chu Luiyue shook his head and tried to punch the wall again.
Wung.
Another wave of energy came. The most subtle thing was that this time, Chu Luiyue used a little more force, and the movement of the water droplet seemed to be a little stronger than the first time. This is... Chu Luiyue looked at the wall curiously. His eyes were completely different from before. She finally knew where that faintly discernible sense of familiarity came from. Wasn't that solemn, dignified, and lofty aura extremely similar to the water droplet in her dantian? However, after she became a high god, the water droplet kept a low profile and stayed quietly in her body. That was why she didn't think of it for a while. But thinking back to the past, she was often picked on by the water droplet. Chu Luiyue's eyes were filled with suspicion. Could it be that the water droplet in her body had something to do with this wall? If that was the case, did it mean that she could find a way to cross this wall and successfully meet up with the Taizu? Just as this thought flashed through her mind, a harsh voice suddenly came from behind her. Uncle Luo Yan, it's them. They're really haunting me. Chu Luiyue rubbed the space between his eyebrows and slowly turned around. As expected, he saw a few familiar faces. The one who spoke just now was Nan Yi. Different from the timid and aggrieved appearance before, Nan Yi's eyes were arrogant, and her expression was arrogant. From top to bottom, there was no longer any fear from before. At this moment, she was standing beside a middle-aged man and pointing at Chu Luiyue. It's her. She's the one who reduced us to such a state. Uncle Luo Yan, you must avenge Yi. Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows and smiled. No wonder she suddenly became so presumptuous. It turned out that she had asked for reinforcements. She turned her gaze slightly and looked at the man called Uncle Luo Yan by Nan Yi. That man looked to be in his 30s. He was tall and burly, with wheat-colored skin, sharp eyebrows, and starry eyes. He could be considered handsome. But what was more eye-catching was the shocking aura around him. Although the other party hadn't made a move yet, Chu Luiyue had already quickly determined the other party's realm. He was definitely a venerable god expert. And he was the kind with extremely strong combat strength. The number of venerable god experts she had seen in her life could be counted on one hand, but she had a deep impression of every one of them. This kind of person's aura was completely different from that of a venerable doctor or a venerable weapon refiner. As long as he stood there, he didn't need to do anything and he already had enough deterrence. No wonder Nan Yi was suddenly so confident. While Chu Luiyue was sizing up Luo Yan was also sizing her up. After looking around, a trace of surprise flashed across his eyes. Because he was actually unable to detect this woman's true realm. The other party's strength was obviously inferior to his. He was a venerable god expert and was famous for his eyesight. Generally speaking, as long as he glanced at the other party, he could easily see through the other party's background. But this woman, he couldn't see through her. The only explanation was that she had an extraordinary divine artifact on her that was specially used to conceal her aura. Even he couldn't see through it. It seemed that he still couldn't underestimate them. Luo Yan's mind raced, but his expression was very calm. He put one hand behind his back and took a step forward. Were you the one who caused Yi's injuries? His tone was calm, but there was no anger in it, and there was a sense of superiority in it. It was a simple sentence, but when it came out of his mouth, it was like a question. Before Chu Luiyue could speak, Xiao had already walked in front of her. You haven't even introduced yourself, yet you're questioning my princess consort. Is this the rule of your Nan family? Luo Yan frowned. You're the holy son of Yuntian Tower, Xiao? Xiao's thin lips curved slightly, and there was a faint smile on his face. Before coming here, they should have already said a lot about us. Don't you think it's unnecessary to ask this question now? Luo Yan slowly clenched his fists. On the way here, he had indeed heard a few people talk about what had happened before. At first, he thought that they were exaggerating, but now it seemed that Rong Xiu was indeed as arrogant as they said. He knew that he was here to collect a debt, but he was still so righteous and even tit for tat. Luo Yan smiled, but it was obvious that he didn't take Rong Xiu seriously. Rong Xiu, I can understand that you're young and frivolous, but it's not a good thing to be too arrogant. Today, I'm here to seek an explanation for you. This matter has nothing to do with you, so I advise you to step aside. In other words, he was here to make trouble for Chu Luiyue. Rong Xiu also smiled, but there seemed to be a layer of frost between his eyebrows, and there was a biting cold air. What if I say no? Mobile users, please browse for a more high-quality reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1685. As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere froze. The smile on Luo Yan's face faded. Rong Xiu, I know that you have been quite famous in the Divine Ruins world all these years. But there is always someone better than you. Don't tell me you don't know that? This sovereign is only giving you this face because you are indeed someone important. Don't go too far. Rong Xiu's smile deepened, as if he had heard a joke. You want to touch I's princess consort, and you even asked me not to interfere. Luo Yan, don't you think it's ridiculous? This sentence made the last trace of smile on Luo Yan's face disappear completely. His expression became cold and solemn, and a heavy pressure spread out from his body. Do you really want to be enemies with me? Rong Xiu smiled but didn't say anything, as if he was too lazy to answer this question. Such an attitude was undoubtedly the most direct provocation to Luo Yan. You, Uncle Luo Yan. Seeing that he was about to fly into a rage, Nan Yi hurriedly grabbed his arm. Uncle Luo Yan, didn't you come this time to avenge me? Don't target the wrong person. Didn't I already say that all the conflicts and problems were caused by that Shengguan Yu? Luo Yan looked at her thoughtfully. Nan Yi looked away guiltily. Nan Yusheng and the others standing behind couldn't help but look at each other with complicated expressions. Actually, Rong Xiu is clearly the one who should be punished if we pursue this matter. But after Nan Yi invited Luo Yan over, she pushed most of the blame to Shengguan Yu. At this point, how could they not understand Nan Yi's thoughts? But now that things had come to this, they couldn't say anything. Luo Yan had always doted on Nan Yi, and he believed almost everything she said. Wouldn't they be adding to the trouble if they went up to say these things? Thus, they could only choose to remain silent. Seeing their reaction, Luo Yan could guess what was going on. Although he doted on Nan Yi, it didn't mean that he was brainless. Although he was a little surprised, he had never seen Nan Yi so protective of anyone. His intentions were as clear as day. Luo Yan frowned. Nan Yi had long reached the age of marriage, but she had never been interested in these things. It was rare for her to fall in love with someone, but that person just had to be Rong Xiu. His identity was still acceptable, but who in the Divine Ruins realm didn't know that Rong Xiu had already personally chosen a princess and set up a marriage contract? If word of this got out, her reputation, Luo Yan wanted to say something to her, but when he saw how guilty Nan Yi looked, his heart ached for her, and he couldn't bring himself to say the words that were at the tip of his tongue. No matter what, the child had grown up, and he still had to give her some face outside. These words, it wouldn't be too late to say them when we get back. But now, he had to solve the problem at hand. Thinking of this, his eyes darkened as he looked at Chu Luiyue. Danger. Chu Luiyue immediately became alert the moment his gaze swept over. His entire body tensed up. Even if the other party didn't say anything, she still keenly sensed the other party's killing intent. This was an extremely sensitive sixth sense that she had developed after experiencing countless life and death situations. Chu Luiyue's brows moved slightly as countless guesses and thoughts flashed through her mind. This Luo Yan seemed to be targeting her? Just because she bullied Nan Yi? She heard what he said very clearly just now. He seemed to be here only for Nan Yi and didn't include the others at all. From the beginning to the end, he really only had Nan Yi in his eyes and heart. Strange, there was no need to talk about the two elders. Wasn't that Nan Yuxing the eldest young master of the Nan family and Nan Yi's biological brother? He was injured more seriously than Nan Yi, but why did it seem like Luo Yan didn't care at all? Wasn't such favoritism a little too much? Actually, Chu Luo didn't know that Luo Yan was famous for doting on Nan Yi, who in the Nan family didn't know that offending Nan Yi was equivalent to offending Luo Yan. Although Nan Yifan doted on her a lot, there were still times when he was strict with her. But Luo Yan wasn't like that. Since young, as long as Nan Yi asked, he would try his best to satisfy any request. Even if Nan Yi was arrogant and willful and had caused a lot of trouble in the past, he had never said anything harsh to her. However, Luo Yan was powerful and had a very noble status in the Nan family. Most people couldn't do anything to him. Speaking of which, a large part of the reason why Nan Yi had developed her current personality was because of Luo Yan. But Luo Yan never felt that there was anything wrong with it and still agreed to Nan Yi's requests. Even if this time, Nan Yifan had already informed him in advance that he wasn't allowed to come and help on his own. After receiving Nan Yi's news, he immediately rushed over. However, considering that he had to give Nan Yifan some face, Luo Yan indeed only intended to help Nan Yi vent her anger and leave the rest to them. Yi's request is very simple. As long as you come out and experience all the pain she suffered before and apologize to her, this matter will be considered over. Luo Yan said indifferently. Hearing this, Chu Luiyue almost thought that she had heard wrongly. She blinked and laughed out loud. What? Luo Yan's eyes were cold. Since you heard it, do as I say. My time is limited. Chu Luiyue had always thought that she was arrogant. But today, she had broadened her horizons. Along the way, these people were clearly the ones who kept pestering them and finding trouble with them. Now that things had come to this, they actually felt that they had been wronged. She was already impatient with them, and with the matter of the great ancestor, she was still uneasy. Hearing this now was undoubtedly adding fuel to the fire. But the angrier she was, the more irrational she became. She took a step forward and walked to Rongxiu's side. Then, she reached out and hugged Rongxiu's arm. Rongxiu immediately held her hand and intertwined their fingers. Chu Luiyue smiled slightly and asked, I admit that some of her injuries are indeed related to me, but aren't you curious why I treated her like this? Luo Yan frowned. Chu Luiyue blinked and slowly said, That's right. She snatched my man right in front of me. She even did such a shameless thing. Can't I hit her? Nan Yi's face instantly turned pale and then flushed red. Shengguan you. She really didn't expect Chu Luiyue to be so straightforward and unpleasant. She had never been humiliated like this since she was young. Luo Yan's expression also changed. Nan Yi hurriedly glanced at him and quickly explained. Uncle Luo Yan, don't listen to her nonsense. She's the one who slandered me. It's not impossible for me to apologize. But before that, second Miss Nan, please apologize to me first.
How about that?
Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from love. Chapter 1686. Nan Yi's face turned red and white. What nonsense are you spouting? Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows in surprise. Did I say something wrong? Didn't you say that as long as my husband divorces me, you will? Did I hear wrongly? You. Nan Yi almost fainted from anger. How could she let Uncle Luo Yan know about this? In front of him, she had always been well-behaved and obedient. Even though she liked to be willful and act coquettishly sometimes, she had never said or done anything overboard in front of him. She knew that although this uncle of hers looked young, he was actually an old fogey. He was very conservative about many things. Now that Shengguan had exposed this matter in front of him, what should she do in the future? Sure enough, Luo Yan looked at her coldly. Did you really say that? Nan Yi's heart trembled. She rarely heard Uncle Luo Yan speak to her in such a tone. For a moment, she was worried and afraid. Her heart was in a mess. I didn't. Nan Yi's eyes reddened, and she looked aggrieved. Uncle Luo Yan, you watched me grow up. How could I say such things and do such things? Are you going to believe an outsider and not me? Luo Yan's gaze wavered. What Nan Yi said was not unreasonable. If the other party had said that on purpose to slander her, he glanced at the people opposite him. Nan Yuxing hurriedly said, "That's right. Uncle Luo Yan, Yi was really wronged. Although she is usually a little willful, she is still very principled in many things. She didn't say those things at all. It was all made up by Sheng Guanyu." Luo Yan looked at Elder Wu Peng and Nan Yuxing. Judging from their attitude, they seemed to agree. The anger in Luo Yan's heart subsided a little. From the corner of his eye, he saw Nan Yi's red eyes and nose. His heart ached for her and his tone finally softened. "All right, why wouldn't I believe you? Don't cry." Nan Yi heaved a sigh of relief, but she still looked very aggrieved. "Mother has taught me these principles before, so why would I do that? Uncle Luo Yan, you've wronged me." Hearing her mention her mother, Luo Yan's expression darkened, and the gaze he looked at her with became even more tender. He rubbed Nan Yi's head. "All right, Uncle has wronged you. This time, I'll definitely help you vent your anger. I won't let you be wronged, okay?" Only then did Nan Yi smile through her tears. "Uncle is the best to me." After she finished speaking, she glanced at Chu Luyue, seemingly unintentionally, with a hint of sarcasm. Uncle Luo Yan had doted on her for so many years. How could he side with someone else? Today, she was going to make Sheng Guanyu pay 100 times the price. Chu Luyue was amazed and almost couldn't help but applaud. She had seen people who spoiled their children, but she had never seen someone who spoiled their children to such an extent. No wonder she always felt that Nanny's brain was abnormal. It turned out that everyone in the Nan family was the same. She instantly lost interest in arguing with the other party. They were obviously here to find trouble with her. No matter what the truth was, they obviously didn't care at all. As expected, Luo Yan said, "Sheng Guanyu, no matter what you say now, the outcome won't change. If you don't agree to my suggestion just now, don't blame me for being rude." Did this mean that he had directly changed to a threat? Rongxiu's force surged in his palm, and the temperature around him quickly dropped. Chu Luyue scratched his palm lightly. This wasn't a good time to make a move. Although she wasn't afraid, Taizu was still on the other side of the wall. They had to focus on more important things. Rongxiu's gaze turned slightly, and he glanced at her. Chu Luyue gave him a look. Rongxiu's gaze flickered, but in the end, he lowered his eyes slightly to hide the surging waves in his eyes. "It's not impossible for me to agree to your suggestion, but I have my own conditions. If you agree to it, I can negotiate with you," Chu Luyue said with a smile. Luo Yan thought that she would be angry, furious, or even explode, but he didn't expect her to say something like this. "This Sheng Guanyu doesn't seem to be what I expected." Luo Yan's expression turned cold. "Do you think you still have the right to say this?" Chu Luyue chuckled and glanced at Nan Yuxing and the others. "Don't you guys know best whether I have the right to say this or not?" It seemed like they didn't tell Luo Yan that she killed the black-robed man. Chu Luyue's words made them feel guilty, for some reason. Although they didn't want to admit it, they had to admit that Rongxiu and Sheng Guanyu seemed to have an extraordinary trump card. If the two sides really fought, the outcome would be uncertain, especially when that little girl was behind her. Elder Wu Peng paused and finally took the initiative to speak. "What are your conditions?" Luo Yan was even more surprised. Elder Wu Peng had always been arrogant, but he was actually willing to accept Sheng Guanyu's suggestion? "What exactly?" "It's very simple." Chu Luyue smiled, and her eyes curved into crescents as she looked sincere. "As long as you find the thing you're looking for and give it to me, I can agree to your request. We'll trade fairly. Dream on." Before Chu Luyue could finish speaking, Nan Yi suddenly interrupted her. She really dared to think that they would use that thing to exchange for it. Chu Luyue's smile didn't change, but her voice turned cold. "I'll return the same words to you. You want to force me to apologize and beg for mercy. I think you're dreaming. Digression, ha ha ha. Today we will update together. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1687. Dead Silence. Chu Liyue's words dazed the few people opposite her, including Luo Yan. None of them had expected Chu Liyue to have the guts to say such brazen words. Her attitude was too unyielding and her eyes were cold. Although the corners of her lips were slightly curved, they were as sharp as a blade and carried a murderous intent that seemed to be able to cut through everything. Nandi's heart suddenly trembled violently. An indescribable fear surged from the depths of her heart. This wasn't the first time she felt such fear when facing Shang Guanyu. It was just that it wasn't so clear and strong before. Looking at that pair of eyes, a clear thought flashed through her mind at lightning speed. If she provoked Shang Guanyu, she would really kill her. Nan Yi originally wanted to mock and retort, but at this moment, she was at a loss for words. Her legs were a little weak. If Luo Yan wasn't standing beside her, she would have already retreated uncontrollably. Luo Yan's frown deepened when he saw this. How did she find out about this? He was obviously questioning Nan Yi and the others. Not many people knew that they were looking for that thing. Now, even Shang Guanyu, which they had no relationship with, know they should be enemies. Nan Yuxing broke out in a cold sweat. He hurriedly said, "Uncle Luo Yan, we didn't reveal it on purpose. It's just that when we were discussing this matter in private, they overheard it." Luo Yan's gaze turned even colder. This mistake was even more ridiculous. They were overheard? Weren't they too careless? This was a serious matter, but they didn't have the slightest bit of vigilance. Elder Bai Tong stepped forward to smooth things over. Luo Yan, actually, this matter isn't eldest young master and second Mrs. fault. It's all my and Wu Peng's negligence. There was really no way to explain this matter. They had always been very vigilant. But that day, when Rong Xiu appeared not far away from them, there wasn't any fluctuation at all. They really couldn't be blamed for this matter. But they really couldn't say this out loud. It was embarrassing. Moreover, what was the use of saying all this now? Elder Wu Peng stared at Chu Liyue. "You really do know what we're looking for." Previously, it was only a guess, but now it was absolutely certain. Chu Liyue frowned. She was just trying to trick them because she could tell that what they were looking for was very important to them. But she really didn't know what it was. She was already too busy with her own affairs, so how could she have the time to care about them? Upon hearing this, Nan Yi immediately perked up. She suddenly raised her hand and pointed at Chu Liyue. "She doesn't just know. That thing is on her." Her voice was so sharp that it hurt people's ears. And this sentence caused the atmosphere to become even more stagnant. Chu Liyue could clearly feel that the aura of the people in front of him had changed greatly at this moment. An extremely dangerous aura loomed over them. "Believe it or not, I don't know what you're looking for. As for what you said about that thing being on my body, it's even more nonsense." Chu Liyue laughed and pointed at the stones scattered around her. "To be honest, after I came to the god-slaying tomb, the only thing I took from here was these stones. Could it be that these are what you're looking for?" Sophistry. Nan Yi was full of confidence at this moment, and her voice rose a few degrees. "I definitely won't be wrong about that thing's aura. It's on your body. Even now, you still refuse to admit it. I was wondering why it was so coincidental that we kept bumping into you along the way. So, you've been planning to snatch this thing from the beginning." Chu Liyue became more and more irritated. She didn't look for trouble, but trouble always came knocking on her door. Time after time, it was really annoying. However, Nan Yi didn't notice the change in her aura and continued talking to herself. "Uncle Luo Yan, not only did she hurt me, but she also snatched my thing. This time, you must help me. You must not let her off easily." Clang. The sound of a zither filled with murderous intent suddenly came from the black wall. The stones scattered on the ground also became restless. The energy of heaven and earth in the surroundings started to flow rapidly. Everyone was shocked. Nanny's voice also stopped abruptly as she looked at everything that suddenly happened in front of her in horror. Chu Luiyue looked up slightly. Her eyes were cold, like ice and snow that hadn't melted for 1,000 years, and the coldness was oppressive. She said word by word, "Are you done?" Nan Yi met her gaze, and her throat suddenly felt like it was being strangled by an invisible hand. At this moment, even breathing seemed to have become difficult. The blood all over her body also froze. There had never been a moment when she felt the threat of death so vividly. Luo Yan pulled her behind him and took a step forward, the force around him surging. Something was wrong. There was something wrong with the Shengguanyu and the black wall behind her. There was also something wrong. Why was there suddenly a strange sound of a zither coming from inside? Chu Ning and Rong Xiao immediately looked at each other. This was the zither sound that she had mentioned previously? Rong Xiao held her hand tightly. His cold and deep voice reverberated in her ears, and Chu Luiyue instantly snapped out of her daze. The layer of indifference in her eyes quietly dissipated, and when she looked up again, it had already returned to normal. She had concealed all the changes in her emotions perfectly, and only Rong Xiao, who was beside her, saw it clearly. At the same time, the sound of the zither quietly stopped, and the surrounding stones also returned to normal. Even the surging of the energy in the surroundings gradually calmed down. It was as if that momentary movement just now was just an illusion. Rong Xiao's brows moved slightly. Just as he was about to speak, a majestic force suddenly descended. At the same time, the sound of something breaking through the air whistled over. Rong Xiao looked up. It was Luo Yan who had taken this opportunity to make a move. His eyes instantly turned cold. With a wave of his sleeve, a golden flame quickly flew out and set up a barrier in front of the two of them. However, Luo Yan was a god expert, and he had extremely rich combat experience. Rong Xiao's move had long been within his expectations. Therefore, he had not held back from the beginning.
Cheat.
Luo Yan's force transformed into an arrow and directly pierced Rong Xiao's barrier. Then, it went straight for Chu Luiyue's glabella. The killing intent was biting cold. At this moment, Rong Xiao directly made a move and grabbed the arrow tightly. However, before they could breathe a sigh of relief, Chu Luiyue suddenly felt as if something had wrapped around her ankle. She looked down and saw that a transparent rope as thick as a thumb had unknowingly appeared by her feet and tightly bound her ankle. Her heart sank. Luo Yan had already pulled. Chu Luiyue's body was immediately dragged out uncontrollably. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1688. You. The sudden turn of events shocked Chu Ning and Dumpling, and they prepared to step forward. However, Chu Luiyue reacted extremely quickly. A cold glint flashed across her hand. Red Cloud Sword. She flipped her wrist and slashed at the transparent rope.
Clang.
The crisp sound of jade hitting stone was heard. Sparks flew. Chu Luiyue's heart sank. Red Cloud Sword was a supremacy artifact. It was extremely sharp and could cut through metal like mud. This transparent rope looked soft and transparent, but it was actually extremely flexible and tough. His sword only left a shallow white mark on the surface of the stone. Luo Yan snorted. This Shengguanyu was indeed quite capable. He could even use a supremacy artifact so smoothly. Unfortunately, an exalted god was ultimately just an exalted god. This bit of strength was really not enough in front of him. Thinking of this, he grabbed the other end of the rope tightly and pulled again. Divine Binding Vine, restrain. The transparent rope immediately tightened, and a bright red mark appeared on Chu Luiyue's ankle. Her body was pulled by this force, and she lost her balance again. Rong Xiao moved and was about to make a move when a black figure suddenly flashed in front of him. It was Elder Wu Pring. Rong Xiao, today we just want to seek justice for second miss from Shengguanyu. After this matter is over, we will naturally release her. Why do you have to do this and make things worse? Rong Xiu seemed to have heard a joke, and his thin lips curved into an extremely cold smile. That is I's princess consort. You did this in front of I, and you wanted to pretend that I did not see it? It seems that you have turned a deaf ear to what I said earlier. His voice was as cold as ice, and it was bone-piercing. Elder Wu Peng paused and suddenly recalled Rong Xiu's nonchalant smile when he mentioned the family head. This was something that he had been secretly worried about. But now that things had come to this, it was obviously impossible for them to back down. We don't want to be enemies with Yuntian Tower. It won't do anyone any good. As long as Sheng Guanyu was willing to apologize, this matter could be resolved. Before he finished speaking, Rong Xiu had already raised his hand. A cluster of golden flames surged from the bottom of his eyes. You're wrong about one thing. Rong Xiu's force surged, and the terrifying pressure continued to rise. From the moment you touched her, you became the mortal enemy of Yuntian Tower.
Boom.
A powerful force went straight for Elder Wu Peng's face. Rong Xiu, you... Elder Wu Peng did not expect that Rong Xiu would actually attack him. He was caught off guard and narrowly avoided the attack. However, a long burn mark was still left on his shoulder. The intense burning pain made Elder Wu Peng both shocked and angry. Did Rong Xiu know what he was doing? Was he really going to go against them for Sheng Guanyu? They were not after Sheng Guanyu's life. Countless thoughts flashed through Elder Wu Peng's mind, but he did not dare to slack off. He hurriedly mobilized the force in his body and braced himself to fight Rong Xiu. But soon, he sensed that something was wrong. Why did Rong Xiu's combat power seem to be stronger than before? The two of them had only exchanged a few blows, but Elder Wu Peng already felt that he could not hold on any longer. Could it be that Rong Xiu had been hiding his true strength before? This aura was clearly much stronger than that of an ordinary high god. Most importantly, Rong Xiu's attacks were ruthless, and every move was fatal. There were no unnecessary movements, and he did not leave any room for Elder Wu Peng. This was the fighting spirit and vigor that could only be obtained after experiencing countless life-and-death battles. Elder Wu Peng had seen his fair share of storms, and his strength was not weak either. However, he had spent most of his time and energy on refining weapons and had not carefully studied the cultivation of martial artists. Hence, at this moment, he was quickly at a disadvantage against Rong Xiu. On the other side, Chu Ning could not hold back and charged forward. Elder Bai Tong saw this scene and could not help but sneer. A Stage 1 martial artist? Did he see wrongly? This kind of existence that was inferior to an ant actually had such guts? He must be tired of living. Elder Bai Tong waved his sleeves. A ball of flames suddenly appeared in his palm. Then it quickly flew out. Bang, bang, bang. When the flame was just a step away from Chu Ning, it suddenly exploded. It transformed into countless tiny sparks. You overestimate yourself. It's your honor to die in my hands. What? Elder Bai Tong's words came to an abrupt end. He widened his eyes in shock, almost unable to believe what he saw. The countless sparks that were burning fiercely seemed to be pushed by a force and suddenly scattered in all directions. And Chu Ning, who was supposed to be dead, was standing on the spot unharmed. Around his body, there was a blue stream of light gently surging. That was God territory? Because of the shock, Elder Bai Tong's voice became sharp. Nanyu Xing and the rest noticed the commotion and their expressions changed slightly. How can a Stage 1 martial artist have a god territory? Nanyu Xing was originally happy to watch the show and wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to vent his anger. He did not expect that things would develop in an unexpected direction. Rong Xiu being able to contend with Elder Wu Peng was actually within their expectations. After all, Elder Bai Tong's injury was caused by him. But this middle-aged man with ragged clothes and bloodstains all over his body clearly looked ordinary. How could he display a god territory? The aura on his body was indeed that of a Stage 1 martial artist. This is the indestructible divine body. Luo Yan's eyes turned slightly and looked meaningfully at Chu Ning. He quickly had a guess. In the world, There was probably only this unique divine body that could display a god territory as a stage 1 martial artist. Although there was nothing to be afraid of, these people did have some abilities. No wonder they could last until now in the god-slaying tomb and make Wu Peng and the rest suffer such a huge loss.
Clang.
Another fierce collision sound was heard. Luo Yan retracted his gaze and saw that Chu Luyue was still trying to use Red Cloud's sword to cut the divine binding vine. He laughed carelessly and looked at Chu Luyue with undisguised contempt and indifference. Childish. To him, Chu Luyue's actions were obviously useless struggles. With a flick of his wrist, the divine binding vine quickly retracted and extended upwards. Half of Chu Luyue's body, including the hand that was holding the sword, was tightly bound by the transparent divine binding vine. Her brows furrowed even tighter. This thing was indeed not ordinary. At this moment, she could almost feel that the force around her seemed to be trapped by this divine binding vine. Luo Yan raised his hand and clenched it. Chu Luyue's neck tightened. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1689. Her body was forced to hang in the air as if an iron hand was gripping her neck tightly. A terrifying pressure pressed down on his body, making it difficult for him to even breathe. Chu Liyue's face flushed red. Luo Yan's eyes were high and mighty. Are you willing to apologize now? Nandi stood beside him and couldn't help but smile smugly when she saw this scene. She looked at Chu Luyue with a trace of undisguised cold mockery. Sheng Guanyu was indeed capable. If it was a one-on-one fight, Nandi was sure that she was definitely not her match. But so what? Even if she couldn't defeat her, she could ask Uncle Luo Yan for help. In the end, Sheng Guanyu would still be trampled under her feet. The sound of the zither seemed to be getting closer and clearer to Chu Liyue's ears. Her lips curled into a smile, but there was coldness in the depths of her black jade-like eyes. You're dreaming. You're courting death. Luo Yan held the divine binding vine tightly and was about to move when he suddenly felt a cold wind coming from the side. He frowned and quickly turned to look. Unknowingly, a small figure had already appeared around him. The distance between them was less than 3 steps. His heart was suddenly filled with shock. When did this little girl come here? How come he didn't sense any energy or spatial fluctuation? Dumpling's small face was full of anger, and her eyes were red. The lotus leaf dress on her body fluttered even though there was no wind. At a glance, it was like a raging flame that was going to devour everything. How dare you bully you? You're courting death. Tuanzi roared, and at the same time, he punched out. Her small hand was chubby and tender. When it was clenched into a fist, it looked like a soft cotton candy. However, Luo Yan's expression suddenly changed. The speed of Dumpling's punch was simply too fast. Moreover, when her fist struck, the surrounding void actually couldn't withstand it and started to collapse one after another. It was obvious that this fist contained an astonishing amount of power. Luo Yan's eyes darkened as he punched out at the same time.
Bang!
The two fists collided, producing a muffled sound. Luo Yan felt as if his fist had landed on a steel plate. After a brief moment of silence, an indescribable numbing pain spread through his body. Luo Yan's eyelids twitched violently. If it wasn't for the fact that his divine body had already reached large success, his bones would have been shattered. On the other hand, the little girl's expression did not change. It was as if she could not feel any pain at all. What a hard fist! What a powerful physical body! Countless speculations flashed through Luo Yan's mind. Such a terrifying melee ability was definitely not something an ordinary human could possess. What's more, this little girl clearly didn't have the slightest ripple of origin power on her body. Could it be a magical beast? However, the only ones that could transform into human form were the 2 ancient divine beasts. I've never heard of them being able to transform into such an appearance. Before he could figure it out, Dumpling's second punch had already arrived. I can't fight her head-on anymore. Luo Yan's brows furrowed. With a tap of his toes, he swiftly retreated.
Pa.
Seeing that he was about to retreat, Dumpling stomped on the divine binding vine ruthlessly. Just as the transparent rope was about to wrap around her, Dumpling narrowed her eyes, and her body suddenly burned with reddish-gold flames. At the same time, she bent down, grabbed the divine binding vine in her hand, and tugged hard. The divine binding vine instantly tightened its grip. Luo Yan's other hand was still tightly holding onto the divine binding vine. This time, it directly pulled him back, causing him to be unable to continue retreating. However, at this moment, he could no longer be bothered to be shocked by Dumpling's strength. This was because he had finally confirmed Dumpling's identity. Reddish gold heavenly phoenix? This flame, this aura. It's definitely a reddish gold heavenly phoenix. He quickly circulated the energy around him and was in a stalemate with Dumpling. At the same time, his gaze kept wandering between Dumpling and Chu Luyue. An absurd guess appeared in his mind. Could it be? This reddish gold heavenly phoenix is Shangguanyu's contracted divine beast. Luo Yan was shocked and really did not dare to believe it. However, apart from this, there seemed to be no other better answer. If not for the contract, why would this reddish gold heavenly phoenix be so angry because of Shangguanyu's injury? It would not even care about anything else and rush up to attack. But how arrogant was the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? They usually did not even bother to interact with humans, let alone have a contract with them. Such a reddish gold heavenly phoenix had wandered outside and become a contracted divine beast of the human race. However, the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan did not have any reaction at all. Luo Yan found it unbelievable. However, now is not the time to dwell on this. After hesitating for a moment, he simply let go of the divine binding vine. Dumpling was caught off guard and fell back uncontrollably due to inertia. On Chu Liyue's side, she had just managed to catch her breath and was about to help Dumpling up when another force suddenly attacked her. Not good. Her heart skipped a beat, and she quickly dodged. At this moment, Luo Yan seized the opportunity and pounced on her again. This time, his speed was even faster. Chu Liyue instinctively sensed danger and was forced to retreat. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had retreated quite a distance away from Dumpling. Chu Liyue frowned. Luo Yan clearly wanted to avoid Dumpling from attacking her. Although Dumpling's combat strength was not bad, Luo Yan was a god-level expert after all. It might not be a problem to temporarily block him, but it was impossible for her to truly defeat Luo Yan. She clenched the Red Cloud sword in her hand tightly, but because Luo Yan's suppression was too strong, she was unable to attack. Soon, Luo Yan approached her again. Chu Liyue's speed was not slow, and she was definitely considered one of the best among cultivators of the same level. However, compared to Luo Yan, she was still too weak. Luo Yan caught up to her without much effort at all. This time, his attack was very direct, and his palm was about to hit Chu Liyue. An indescribable sense of suppression came crashing down. Chu Liyue's breathing stagnated. Originally, she wanted to try to receive this attack, but the other party's suppression was too strong, and she could not circulate the energy in her body. The difference in strength between the two of them was too big, so she did not even have the chance to attack. Luo Yan's expression was indifferent, and he looked at her as if he was looking at an ant that was struggling futilely. Shangguanyu, you should know that there are some people that you can't afford to offend. As his voice fell, the tyrannical wind from his palm had already enveloped Chu Liyue. At this moment, her body seemed to be nailed to the ground, and she could not move at all. She could only watch helplessly as that shocking power came closer and closer to her. A thick smell of blood spread out between her lips and teeth. The sound of the zither beside Chu Liyue's ears suddenly became clear at this moment. Her temples were throbbing, as if something was about to break out from the bottom of her heart. However, at this moment, a deep and vigorous voice exploded in the sky like a sudden clap of thunder. Who dares to hurt my disciple? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1690. Master. Chu Luiyue was overjoyed and immediately looked up. The void vibrated and rippled. A figure in a long white robe stepped out from within. It was the dean of Lingxiao College, her master, Nan Suhui. He waved his sleeve, and a powerful force flew out. It went straight for Luo Yan. Danger. Luo Yan was shocked and had no choice but to stop and retreat. However, the force of Nan Suhui's strike was so strong that it caused him to stagger backward. Almost at the same time, Elder Wu Peng was no match for Rong Xiao and suffered a heavy blow. He flew backward and landed heavily on the ground. Elder Bai Tong, who had been fighting with Chu Ning, was also shocked when he noticed the commotion and immediately retreated. Uncle Luo Yan. Elder Wu Peng. Nan Yi could no longer maintain the smile on her face when she saw the people on her side being repelled. She rushed over in a hurry. Nan Yuxing opened his mouth but did not say anything. However, a strong sense of uneasiness suddenly surged in his heart. Nan Suhui's figure flashed and blocked in front of Chu Luiyue. Rong Xiao stepped forward and supported Chu Luiyue. Nan Suhui first turned around and glanced at her nervously. Are you okay? Chu Luiyue shook her head. Master, don't worry. I'm fine. It was just a flesh wound. It was not a big deal. Luo Yan did not have time to be ruthless. Her master had arrived. Rong Xiao's face was cold and solemn. He reached out to touch Chu Luiyue's neck. Hiss! The sudden pain made Chu Luiyue shrink her neck. Sensing Rong Xiao's aura turning colder, Chu Luiyue quickly said, "It's just a small wound. It's not a big deal." When the two of them were fighting just now, there were a few red marks on her neck. She was so anxious that she forgot about it. Rong Xiao didn't say anything. He stared at the wound with a deep look in his eyes. Chu Ning and Dumpling quickly followed. Although Chu Luiyue came out unscathed, they all saw the situation clearly. Luo Yan was indeed ruthless. If Nan Suhui hadn't arrived in time, no one knew what would have happened to Chu Luiyue. Nan Suhui's face turned cold. He turned to Luo Yan and sneered. Luo Yan, I haven't seen you for many years. You've really become more and more capable. You actually dare to bully this old man's disciple. His voice was deep like thunder, and every single word carried a shocking pressure that smashed heavily into the ears of Luo Yan and the others. Nan Yuxing and Nan Yi, whose cultivation bases were slightly weaker, trembled at the same time and spat out blood. Elder Bai Tong was already seriously injured, so he was unable to dodge in time. Suddenly bearing the terrifying pressure, his face immediately turned pale. There was no need to mention Elder Wu Peng. He had already been beaten black and blue by Rong Xiao. At this moment, he didn't even have the strength to get up. Although Luo Yan was slightly better than them, his face turned extremely ugly when he saw the situation on his side. Nan Suhui actually came. Who in the Divine Ruins world didn't know that Nan Suhui was a rare all-rounder who was extremely outstanding in all aspects of cultivation? He had already broken through to the Supreme God realms several decades ago. Although Nan Suhui had kept a low profile in recent years and rarely appeared in public in the Divine Ruins world, Luo Yan didn't dare to underestimate him. Who knew what realm Nan Suhui's strength had reached? Judging from the blow just now, Nan Suhui was definitely not below his level. This was going to be difficult. Although the number of people on both sides was about the same, there was almost no one on their side who could continue fighting. On the other hand, the people on the other side still had the strength to fight. If they really chose to fight head-on, they would definitely be the ones at a disadvantage. Luo Yan took a deep breath, suppressed the anger in his heart, and cupped his hands at Nan Suhui. So it's Dean Nan. I think Dean Nan has misunderstood what happened just now. Actually, I don't have any other intentions. It's just that there was some conflict between these juniors, and I wanted them to talk things out. Nan Suhui's seniority was higher than his, and he had broken through to the Supreme God realm earlier than him. Therefore, in front of Nan Suhui, he couldn't even say the two words, "this lord." Unfortunately, Nan Suhui snorted disdainfully at his words. Luo Yan, do you really think this old man's eyesight is bad because of old age? Just now. How did you bully you? This old man clearly saw it. Misunderstanding. Don't you think it's funny when you hear this? Nan Su Huai's words were laced with sarcasm. Obviously, he didn't intend to leave Luo Yan any face. Luo Yan's face turned even darker. Dean Nan, I explained it to you properly, but you didn't appreciate it. Isn't this a little too much? Whether it's this old man speaking nonsense or you using your power to bully others, isn't it still a different story? Nan Su Hui sneered. No matter what, you are still a dignified supreme god expert. How could you be so ruthless to a junior? If news of this spreads, Luo Yan, I wonder if you still want to keep your face? You. Luo Yan's face flushed red and white, but he couldn't think of any rebuttal. He didn't think so much and only wanted to help Nan Yi vent her anger, who knew that Shang Guanyu's attitude would be so unyielding and stubborn that he had no choice but to make a move. In the end, Nan Su Hui happened to see it. Nan Su Hui had been a powerful figure in the Divine Ruins world for many years and was also the dean of Lingxiao College. He had seen countless geniuses, but he had only accepted one disciple. One could imagine how picky he was. Moreover, he was famous for being protective of his disciples. Even they who didn't have much contact with Lingxiao College had heard of it. Seeing the scene, Nan Su Hui obviously wouldn't let it go. Dean Nan, since you're here, it's good that you're here. Let's settle our previous debts together. Luo Yan raised his hand and pointed at Nan Yi and the others. Your precious disciple has injured our people to such an extent, and she hasn't even said a word of apology until now. What do you think of this, Dean Nan? Nan Su Hui's gaze swept across the few of them before he squinted and turned to look at Chu Luiyue. Did you do this? Chu Luiyue said calmly. Half of it. Nan Su Hui was stunned. What do you mean half of it? Chu Luiyue raised her chin a little and seemed to smile as she slowly said, That's right. Half of it is because they provoked us, and the other half is because they were unlucky enough to provoke another god. Luo Yan was the first to change his expression. He immediately looked at Nan Yi. You met a venerable god before? Why didn't you say this? They knew how difficult it was to deal with a goddess. Although Elder Wu Peng and Elder Bai Tong were of high status, one was a weapon refiner and the other was a celestial physician. If they really fought, they might not be a match for her goddess. Nan Yi hesitated and seemed to be in a dilemma. Do you know where her goddess came from? No matter what, this debt couldn't be settled just like that. Chu Luiyue suddenly laughed. I've already killed her goddess. You won't be able to find her even if you look for her. Forget it. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1691. As soon as he finished speaking, there was dead silence. Chu Luiyue's expression didn't change as she smiled and said, Oh, right. Oh, that's right. Speaking of which, I did you guys a favor. Not only did you not thank me, but you guys kept finding trouble with me. How interesting. The atmosphere became even stranger. For a moment, Luo Yan didn't know what kind of expression to show. His expression was awkward and stiff. He quickly glanced at Nan Yi and the others, and his heart sank slightly. He knew Nan Yi and the others too well. Since Shang Guanyu had said so, although their expressions were ugly, they didn't look shocked. This proved that this matter was most likely true. Nan Yi finally couldn't help but refute. Who knows if you were the one who killed that person? If you guys used any tricks, it's my ability to use tricks, isn't it? Chu Luiyue interrupted her with a smile. The process wasn't important. The result was the most important. Nan Yi choked. Luo Yan took a deep breath. A high god killed a high god. How is that possible? He had never heard of such a thing in the entire Divine Ruins world. Nan Su Hui was also shocked and hurriedly asked, Is what you said true? Chu Luiyue blinked. Master, when have I ever lied to you? Rong Xiao, Father, and Dumpling can all testify for me. Nan Su Hui cursed in his heart. How many times have you lied to me? But he obviously couldn't say that now. Rong Xiao nodded. You is telling the truth. The reason why we came here this time was because that person wanted to use Lord Chu Ning's life to threaten you, He wanted to kill you, but he was killed instead. He was killed instead. Even Nan Suhui couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. Listen to that. Is this what a human should say? A high god killed a high god. Only you guys can say such things so calmly. However, despite his shock, Nan Suhui quickly accepted this matter. Ever since he had accepted you, as his disciple, he knew that as long as he was with her, there was nothing impossible in this world. This girl had even repaired the Tianxua formation. What was so strange about her killing a god? At this moment, Nan Suhui didn't find it strange at all. He only had one thought left in his mind. Sometimes, when a disciple is too hardworking, it really tests the heart of a master. He was silent for a while, then gave Chu Liu a thumbs up and said seriously, You are well done. You are indeed worthy of being my disciple. When you get back, you have to tell Master what exactly is going on. Chu Liu agreed. Sure. Seeing the happy appearance of the master and disciple, Luo Yan only felt as if there was a string in his brain that suddenly tightened. What time was it now that they were actually discussing these things directly? These people were really going too far. Each and every one of them did not put them in their eyes at all. Everything is just your side of the story. How can we believe it? He finally couldn't hold it in anymore and reprimanded coldly. This voice finally reminded Nan Suhui of their existence. He chuckled. Then what you said just now was also just your side of the story, wasn't it? Why should we believe you? This sentence finally caused the two sides to fall into a stalemate again. Nan Yi bit her lip tightly. She had never thought that things would develop to this point. Wasn't it just dealing with Sheng Guanyu? Why was it so difficult? Even now, she hadn't even taken revenge and had even implicated Uncle Luo Yan. She wasn't stupid. The sudden appearance of this old man made Uncle Luo Yan very wary. Otherwise, he wouldn't have suppressed his anger and spoken so politely just now. Unfortunately, the two sides still didn't seem to be able to come to an agreement. Nandi stole a quick glance at Luo Yan. Based on her past experience, this matter definitely wouldn't go according to what she had thought before, but she wasn't willing to accept it. Nandi reached out and grabbed Luo Yan's sleeve, speaking in an extremely low voice. Uncle Luo Yan, that thing is on her. Luo Yan was shocked and stared at her. Really? Nan Yi pursed her lips and nodded. How would I dare to joke about such a thing? Previously, Elder Wu Prung used the Great Star Disc to investigate, and the result was the same. Otherwise, we wouldn't have left and come back. Luo Yan's expression changed quickly, and he finally looked at Chu Luyue. Originally, he wanted to make peace with the other party. After all, Nan Suhui wasn't someone to be trifled with. But if it was really as Nan Yi said, he was afraid that this matter would have to be reconsidered. Although Nan Yi's voice was very low, no one present was an ordinary person, and everyone heard it clearly. Chu Liyue's eyes were tinged with fatigue and impatience. Even if they weren't annoyed, she was. I'll say it for the last time. I don't know what you're looking for, and that thing isn't on me. Now, either you apologize or continue to fight. You can choose one. With Nan Suhui around, they had a high chance of winning. Of course, they weren't afraid of fighting with them. Nan Suhui frowned. What are they talking about? Chu Liyue shook her head. If she knew, she wouldn't have to play riddles with them here. After a moment, Luo Yan took a step forward. I have a suggestion. Sheng Guanyu, if you're willing to accept my investigation and confirm that the thing is indeed not on you, we can immediately apologize to you and prepare a generous gift to express our apology. If you're unwilling, then I'm afraid today's matter will be delayed for a long time. These words were half a negotiation and half a threat. Chu Liyue frowned and was a little unhappy. Nan Suhui's face turned cold. Luo Yan, I agree. Chu Liyue suddenly said. She thought about this suggestion carefully and felt that she wouldn't be at a disadvantage. Although they had a high chance of winning with her master around, their background wasn't simple. If they really shed all pretense of cordiality, it wouldn't be easy to clean up the mess in the end. It would be best if this matter could be resolved easily. She took a step forward. Please, digression, it's Christmas Eve. Let's all be safe and happy. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from love. Chapter 1692. Luo Yan looked at her deeply, raised his hand, and drew a small arc in front of him. A stream of light flashed, and a palm-sized compass appeared out of thin air. At the same time, a totem was faintly discernible between his brows. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. By the way, don't forget about the conditions that you mentioned earlier. Luo Yan said indifferently. Of course. As he spoke, he gently brushed his hands over the compass. A moment later, the needle on the compass suddenly shook violently. Seeing this, Chu Luiyue frowned slightly, and a trace of inexplicable uneasiness appeared in her heart. This thing's reaction seemed to be really abnormal. Finally, the needle stopped. It pointed straight at Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue's heart sank. Luo Yan suddenly raised his head, and his gaze was as sharp as a knife. Xingguan Yu, what else do you have to say? The evidence was conclusive. It couldn't be more obvious. That thing was indeed on her. Chu Luiyue's hands quickly clenched in her sleeves. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through her mind. How could this be? What exactly were they looking for? Why were they so sure that it was on her? Chu Luiyue didn't think that Luo Yan had done something to deliberately make the needle point at her. At this time, Luo Yan should want to solve this matter more smoothly than them. After all, they didn't have any advantage. If they continued to be entangled, it would only be more disadvantageous for them. He didn't have to do this at all. That meant she really had the thing they were looking for? Dean Nan, I'm sorry. Today, Shangguan, you must hand over the thing. Luo Yan shouted sternly, and then his figure disappeared from the spot. A strong gust of wind suddenly swept over.
Chu Luiyue was alarmed. Luo Yan, how dare you?
Seeing this, Nan Su Huai immediately attacked. Rong Xiao grabbed Chu Luiyue's waist and quickly retreated with her. However, at this moment, Chu Luiyue suddenly felt a chill from behind. She quickly turned around and saw a familiar face.
It was Luo Yan.
This is his divine body. Rong Xiao reacted quickly and attacked without hesitation. However, Luo Yan was a god, and he had summoned his divine body. He was determined to take down Chu Luiyue. He quickly dodged Rong Xiao's attack. With a wave of his sleeve, several silver needles with a cold luster flew out. Those silver needles were about an inch long and sharp. In the blink of an eye, they had surrounded Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue raised his sword to block.
Clang! Clang!
Sharp sounds of collisions rang out one after another. Although those silver needles were small, they contained extremely strong power. After such a fierce attack, Chu Luiyue's sword-wielding hands were numb. Even the webbing between his thumb and forefinger had split open and was bleeding. Rong Xiao was about to come over when he was blocked by Luo Yan's divine body. Just as Chu Luiyue thought that everything was over, the silver needles that she had blocked earlier suddenly changed directions and attacked her again. Moreover, their speed and strength seemed to be even stronger than before. Shocked, Chu Luiyue faced them again. The continuous attacks forced her to continuously dodge and retreat. Suddenly, she felt a chill on her back. She had nowhere to retreat and crashed into a black wall. The wall was rough, and when she was pressed tightly against it, she felt a stinging pain. With a thought, Chu Luiyue already had a black shield in her hand. All the silver needles were blocked outside. They couldn't even leave a mark on it. Luo Yan's expression changed. That black shield, taking advantage of his distraction, Rong Xiao quickly attacked. A cluster of golden flames transformed into a whip and tightly bound his divine body. Luo Yan didn't think much of it and sneered. Even with the power of a god, you dare. Suddenly, his voice came to an abrupt stop, because he realized that his divine body couldn't break free from Rongxiu's fire whip. The more he struggled, the more intense the burning pain on his body was. You. Luoyan looked at Rongxiu in shock and anger. Looking into those bottomless eyes, he suddenly felt a chill in his heart. And because he was stunned for a moment, he didn't see the thick black color that was silently surging in the golden flames that tightly bound him. However, just as the situation gradually became clear, Chu Luiyue glanced out of the corner of her eye, and her heart instantly tightened. Nan Yuxing was suddenly running toward Chu Ning. His face was gloomy, and he was exuding a terrifying murderous intent. At the same time, a saber appeared in his hand. The saber was wide and thick, and the tip of the saber was suffused with a strange blue light. It was poisonous. Father, be careful. Chu Luiyue immediately planned to move and run in that direction. However, a figure was rapidly closing in on him again. It was none other than Nan Yi. At this moment, her expression was ferocious, and her eyes were filled with murderous intent. But the most shocking thing was that the pressure on her body was suddenly much stronger than before. This wasn't her aura. Almost instantly, Chu Luiyue understood what was going on. This force definitely didn't belong to Nan Yi. In a flash, Nan Yi clenched the triangular pyramid in her hand and stabbed it fiercely toward Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue's body tensed up in an instant. The power of a god. Go to hell. Nan Yi gritted her teeth and said in a low voice. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps of her teeth, carrying deep hatred and resentment. Chu Luiyue didn't hesitate and directly raised the black shield. It blocked in front of him. Whoosh! A sharp, ear-piercing sound rang out, almost making one's scalp tingle. The tyrannical power surged over, and Chu Luiyue's body crashed heavily against the wall behind him once again. It seemed like she had hit something sharp, and a wound appeared on her shoulder and back. Chu Luiyue clenched his teeth tightly as the blood in his body surged. Nan Yi still seemed a little dissatisfied. This triangular pyramid was specially given to her by her father for self-defense before she left home. Previously, she couldn't bear to take it out and use it. It was only when she saw that Chu Luiyue was alone that she had an idea and decided to take advantage of this opportunity to attack her. However, she had originally thought that this attack would be able to take Shanghai Yu's life directly. Nan Yi gritted her teeth and waved the triangular pyramid again indignantly. Even if she couldn't pierce through this strange shield, the power left behind by her father was enough to make Shanghai Yu suffer. However, just as the triangular pyramid was about to land on the black shield again, the sound of a zither suddenly came from afar. The sound of the zither seemed to come from a very far place, but when it landed in her ears, it was extremely clear. The most shocking thing was that the sound of the zither carried an undisguised strong murderous intent. It caused Nan Yi's mind to be in a mess and her entire body to turn numb. Although it was just a sound, she seemed to have smelled a strong smell of blood. She subconsciously stopped what she was doing and looked up. That sound was coming from here. She saw that the black wall behind Chu Luiyue suddenly glowed. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1693. What's going on? For some reason, an indescribable sense of fear suddenly surged from the bottom of Nan Yi's heart as she looked at the flowing light. Even though she didn't know what it was, she still keenly felt the terrifying danger. She didn't even think about it and immediately retreated. At the same time, Chu Luiyue also heard the sound of the zither. She looked up and happened to see Nan Yi staring at the wall behind her with a horrified expression. Her eyes were filled with fear. It was as if she had seen something extremely terrifying. When Nan Yi started to retreat, Chu Luiyue finally turned around to take a look. However, what she saw stunned her for a moment, because she suddenly realized that these streams of light were constantly gathering, as if they were forming some kind of totem. And for some reason she felt that it was a little familiar. She frowned and took a few steps back. She wanted to take a closer look at the giant totem and see what it looked like. However, just as she raised her foot, a tyrannical suction force suddenly came from the wall. Her body immediately rushed forward uncontrollably. In the next moment, her figure completely disappeared behind the wall. Before everyone could react, they saw a white figure quickly hiding behind the wall. It was Rongxiao. In addition, there was also a small figure who was only half a step behind Rongxiao. She also raised her foot and rushed over. That was Dumpling. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the three figures quickly disappeared just like that. This scene shocked everyone present. Wasn't that just a wall? Why did it suddenly devour the three of them? It didn't even leave them any time to react. Nan Su Hui frowned and looked over. Only then did he see that several streams of light had appeared on the black wall. They intertwined with each other and seemed to be outlining a certain pattern. The power on it was so shocking that even the void around the wall was shaking. Nan Su Hui stopped fighting and wanted to rush in. Halfway through, he suddenly heard a figure. President Nan. Nan Su Hui turned around. Yours father, Chuning? Chuning immediately nodded with a worried expression. Is Dean Nan going in as well? I wonder if Chuning can go with you? He was truly worried about you, Although Rongxiao and Dumpling had already followed them in, this incident was too strange, and he was still worried. If they could move together, it should be able to reduce a lot of unnecessary trouble. Nan Su Hui nodded without hesitation. Then, let's go together. After saying that, the two of them really moved forward and entered the black wall. The originally chaotic and noisy scene quickly quieted down. Luo Yan recalled his divine body and looked at the black wall with a frown. In fact, when he arrived here, he noticed this wall at first glance, but because all his attention was on Nan Yi and Shang Guanyu, he didn't pay much attention to it. However, from the looks of it, there was indeed something fishy about this wall. What happened just now. Nan Yuxing couldn't help but murmur in shock. His eyes were filled with astonishment. Everything was fine just a moment ago. How did everyone suddenly disappear? Luo Yan took a step forward and seemed to be planning to go in as well. Nan Yi hurriedly grabbed his sleeve.
Uncle Luo Yan,
You can't go in. Luo Yan saw her panicked expression and only thought that she was frightened by the sudden scene, so he patted her shoulder and said, The thing is still with Shang Guanyu. Don't worry, I'll go get it and come back immediately. Nan Yi still refused to let go and shook her head nervously.
No.
You can't go in. You really can't go in. Uncle Luo Yan, it's too dangerous inside. At this moment, Luo Yan realized that her eyes were filled with fear and her body was trembling slightly. She seemed to be really scared. Could it be that she saw something just now? Luo Yan frowned. What's wrong? Is there a problem? Nan Yi shook her head. I don't know either, but I just feel that something is wrong inside. Uncle Luo Yan, why don't we wait outside? Anyway, they will come out sooner or later, won't they? It's the same to wait for them to come out. Luo Yan frowned even more. No one could guarantee when Shang Guanyu and the others would come out after going in. Moreover, what if they didn't come out? At that time, it wouldn't be so easy to find them and take back the item. But Nan Yi was rarely so scared, and it really made him feel uneasy. He hesitated for a moment, but in the end, his heart ached for Nan Yi. Okay, then let's not go in. We'll just wait here. Before he could finish his sentence, another terrifying suction force swept over from the wall. The figures of the few people were quickly swallowed up. Not long after, all the figures in the area had completely disappeared. The wilderness once again regained its usual silence. Darkness. Endless darkness. Chu Luiyue only felt her body falling continuously. She was surrounded by a thick black color that couldn't be dissolved. It was quiet, and only the sound of the wind whistling past her ears. Fortunately, this situation didn't last for long. She felt her body fall onto a piece of land. The ground was soft, and the fall wasn't heavy. Chu Luyue stood up and was about to take out a pearl to illuminate the place when a faint light suddenly leaked from above her head. She looked up. There seemed to be a blue-black sky above her head, like the sky in the middle of the night. However, right in the middle, there was an opening that had been cut open by something. Light seeped through and sprinkled on Chu Luyue's body. It was also this light that allowed Chu Luyue to see the surrounding scenery clearly. There was no scenery. All she saw was a piece of black land. Other than that, there was nothing else. She could only see the appearance of the area within 100 steps. Everything further away was still hidden in the darkness, and it was difficult to approach and grasp. Rongxiu. Chu Luyue called out softly. Before entering, she vaguely saw that Rongxiu seemed to be following her closely. But now, it seemed that he wasn't with her. Chu Luyue called out twice more, but there was still no response. This was expected. Chu Luyue pursed her lips and didn't care too much. But where was Dumpling? 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 Chu Luyue called out Dumpling a few more times, but there was no response. The surroundings were quiet. Chu Luyue's hands slowly clenched. Dumpling was her contracted divine beast, and they were telepathic. Even if they were separated by a distance, they could still sense each other. But now, she couldn't even detect Dumpling's breath. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1694. Was it because they were so far apart that they couldn't sense each other, or was there something that forcibly cut off the connection between them? Chu Luyue didn't know. She put away the black shield, but still held the Scarlet Heaven sword tightly in her hand. After resting for a while and adjusting the breath in her body, Chu Luyue lifted her feet and walked forward. She randomly chose a direction. After all, she couldn't tell any direction in this place. Instead of waiting in place and relying on a glimmer of hope to wait for Rongxiu and the others to come, she might as well go find them herself. Even if she couldn't find them in a short time, it would be good to know more about this place. Thus, Chu Luyue stepped on the road alone. Along the way, the faint smell of blood lingered at the tip of her nose. If Chu Luyue wasn't so sensitive to this smell, she might not have noticed it. Unfortunately, she had never been able to identify where this smell came from. It was as if the air here had been filled with this smell. The surroundings were quiet. Chu Luyue could only hear her own footsteps and her heartbeat. At a certain moment, she suddenly stopped and looked ahead. At this moment, the crack on the top of his head was much wider than before. More light shone in, allowing Chu Luyue to see further. In front of her was still a vast expanse. However, Chu Luyue's heart suddenly beat faster, because the sound of the zither that had been lingering in her ears suddenly disappeared at this moment. She unconsciously clenched the Scarlet Heaven sword, and the blood in her body seemed to flow faster. She opened her mouth, only to find that her throat was dry and tight.
Tap, tap, tap.
An unfamiliar sound of footsteps suddenly came from the darkness. The footsteps were slow and calm, as if taking a stroll. However, every step seemed to be stepping on Chu Luyue's heart. She seemed to have a premonition, and her whole body tensed up. Finally, a figure appeared in her line of sight. At the same time, a casual voice with a smile fell into her ears. "You're finally here." On the other side, after Rongxiu followed Chu Luyue in, the surroundings also fell into darkness. But soon, a white light flashed past his eyes. His heart trembled as he looked over. That ray of white light was actually spreading rapidly not far from him. Then, the light quickly condensed into a huge mirror. Everything around them was pitch black, but the appearance of the mirror instantly tore the darkness apart. A faint light was emitted from the mirror. The mirror was huge and wide. At a glance, one could not see the edges of it. It was as if it was completely embedded in the darkness and had become one with the surrounding darkness. It stood quietly in front of Rongxiu. The surroundings were silent, and even the sound of the wind seemed to have stopped. Rongxiu looked up slightly. A figure appeared in the mirror. The lines of his cheeks were smooth, and his appearance was pure and enchanting. He had sword-like eyebrows, a high nose bridge, and thin crimson lips. There wasn't a single spot that wasn't meticulously carved by the heavens. Compared to him, it seemed that everything in the world was dim in color. The figure reflected in the mirror was Rong Xiao. However, it was not exactly the same as Rong Xiao at this moment. Rong Xiao was dressed in white, and his eyes were clear and gentle. He was elegant and charming. However, the person in the mirror was dressed in a black robe. His eyes were deep and dense, and he was majestic and full of vigor. They clearly had the same appearance and figure, but they looked like two completely different people. Rong Xiao narrowed his eyes slightly, but there was no shock on his face. It seemed that he had expected this. He raised his hand, and a golden flame gushed out from his palm, jumping happily. Almost at the same time, the person in the mirror also raised his hand, and a cluster of flame appeared at his fingertips. However, the flame was thick and black. Rong Xiao knitted his brows slightly, but they quickly relaxed as his thin lips curved up slightly. So fast, the person in the mirror looked at him. Since you're here, you should have expected this scene. Besides, you've delayed for too long. He paused and raised his eyebrows. This time, are you going to break through or continue to suppress yourself at the high deity level like before? Rong Xiao gently closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there were golden and black flames in his eyes. The smile on his lips deepened. Break. Ah you. Ah you. In a dark space, Dumpling shouted anxiously as she walked. However, no matter how she shouted, she didn't get any response. The surrounding silence was terrifying. The rims of Tuanzi's eyes were red and filled with tears. She quickly wiped her eyes, clenched her small fists, and cheered herself on. It wasn't that Ayu didn't want her anymore, but she was swallowed into this strange wall. As long as she continued to search, she would definitely find Ayu. Besides, Ayu might also be looking for her. Thinking of this, Tuanzi was motivated again and quickened her pace to move forward. Nan Suhui and Chu Ning came in together, so they were still in the same place. However, they were also trapped in a space and didn't meet anyone else. Therefore, they could only search for an exit while trying to contact others. Chu Luiyue stared at the figure in front of her. Almost at first glance, she was certain that this person was the one she had seen before, the one playing the guqin. However, although they were closer, the other person's figure was still shrouded in a layer of black shadow. It was hazy and couldn't be seen clearly. Chu Luiyue couldn't even tell whether the other person was a man or a woman. Because the voice was as ethereal as the zither, as if it came from far away. The tone was very light, but the voice was beautiful and dreamy. Listening to it made one feel relaxed and comfortable, but it was elusive. Chu Luiyue felt that the scene was really strange. At this moment, she couldn't see the other person's appearance and figure. Even the voice sounded like a dream. It was hard to tell if it was real or fake. However, the other person said such a sentence to her. It seemed like they knew her and had been waiting for her. Chu Luiyue asked tentatively, "You know me?" The person seemed to smile and said casually, "You're holding my zither score. Of course I recognize it." Zither score? Chu Luiyue was stunned. I didn't, suddenly. She seemed to have thought of something, and a trace of shock flashed across her eyes. The only thing on her that was related to the zither sound was probably that water droplet? Just as this thought flashed through her mind, Chu Luiyue felt a strange wave coming from her dantian. The person opposite her raised his hand slightly. That water droplet rushed out of Chu Luiyue's body instantly. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.